Okay, so Yell's asked a question in the chat. I don't know if anyone else has got the answers on this, but it's a question about merging. What happens in merging if someone is familiar with the phenomena in RV? I'm assuming Yell means by merging, accessing another life form at the target and their their faults, their feelings in some way. Is that what you mean, Yell? If you can let us know if that's what you mean.
So I've heard the French,
Yes.
the French remote viewers use that term about
Okay, yeah.
merging.
I don't really have a term for it. I just I guess I just willy-nilly just if I find a life form at the target and I feel they might have some data to impart that helps. I just I don't know. I don't call it merging. I just probe them, get in touch, not in touch with them, I guess, because you're not, it's not anything physical. But I just, draw the word life on my sheet of paper, and then just probe it and then write down all the stuff like I do for anything else at the target. So she asked what happens. Yeah, for me, that's all it is. Really, it's just like a normal RV process. I merge. I don't merge. I just ask questions. Do you guys? I mean, you guys, Carl and Darby and a few of the other people that have a bit of experience. When you access life at targets, do you have any sensation of physically kind of merging with them?
So that merging thing, that's something Lynn has always told us to stay well away from, because and it's happened many times in the CRV list, that Lynn's list. Yeah, there used to be a forum, and if you go into somebody, you end up thinking their thoughts, and that can be really, really dangerous. That happens to Lynn. But in the AI and the SI column, you simply go and talk to them, but you make sure that you're always separate. So merging really isn't something very advisable.
Yes.
If it's real merging, if you're talking about what you said, Daz, talking to somebody, then that's a whole different story.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it comes down to how you phrase about what you're doing in your practice. If you think of yourself as merging with someone, then that would be something to maybe reconsider. I've never thought of it that way. I've just thought of it, if there's life at the target, you can get data from it. Of course, another question is
whether could I share?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could I share? I could share an experience with that. I had a blind target from Fabian Rush, who was the tasker. And I mean, I could assume that most of his targets will be mystery target because there's been a theme. But other than that, it was fully blind. My initial element, the initial impression was very strongly a life form. So I use my own method. I call it ETC. I don't use CRV. So I get these different elements that are different things. So the life form was first, and it was very significantly the major element, the most important. And what I ended up having at the start was a life form, which was bipedal on 2 legs, and it was interacting with technology, yet it was not a human. I called it an amphibian in the beginning, and I came to call it extraterrestrial, which it turned out to be. The target turned out to be to go to Zeta Reticuli stars, and if there is a planet there, to describe the planet. If there is life forms there, then to describe the life forms. I ended up having a conversation with this extraterrestrial within this blind session. It was very aware of me. And when I did touch probes of it and of its objects, it sensed it. Fabian had me reenact the conversations that I wrote down, and he made a video of it. So I don't know if you said, Lynn says it's not advisable. Why not? It's fantastic. I also experienced conversations, at least hearing the minds of human targets, and I just don't see why it's not advisable. It's a good source of data, and I've confirmed a good correlation to feedback also with human targets. Could someone say why would this not be advisable if it's useful?
I think, I mean, I'll let Coral answer this on behalf of Lynn, but I think it's because, and I've seen this in some people that I've worked with over the years. There are some viewers that are a bit more sensitive, and if the target just happens to be, I don't know, for example, I don't know, the Hindenburg, balloon event where it blew up and caught on fire. If they were accessing people actually inside the balloon event, some of these sensitive people would be very disturbed by the thoughts of feelings of someone burning to death, kind of thing.
Overwhelming, you mean?
I've actually seen them report afterwards that they were, they actually felt physically sick and physically, emotionally really upset by that kind of thing. So yeah, it's not, that is not for everyone. But there again, I don't think remote viewing's for everyone either. I think some people aren't in the right place to be doing it. But I can't comment on how Lynn teaches it, because I haven't had any of Lynn's kind of training.
Well, if you merge with somebody, then merging means going into them. So their feelings and their thoughts become your thoughts. So if you're looking for a lost child and you just so happen to merge with the murderer, then you become a murderer. It's as simple as that. And Lynn's most famous example is, you just get sucked into the target. His famous example is, and of course I'm just quoting this from memory, I'm remembering what he told us was that he was doing something with some kind of terrorist activity, and he was saying, okay, when he finished the session, okay, now I need to go home, mow the lawn, kill my wife, and do the shopping. And he said, hang on a minute, what is it? Did I think that? So those are the dangers. Merging means becoming someone else. And people who are not taking steps for protection, step by step, saying this is the other person, this is me, this is the other person, this is me, end up being completely sucked in and not being able to. Russell's somebody who has done a lot of shamanic work, actually separating personalities, but it's very easy to get sucked in. And I have seen various people on the list having a very bad time, actually having to go to people to help get those out.
And that's sort of where I came from, not realizing that I was so sensitive. When I came into healing and complementary therapies before remote viewing, I used to faint regularly and always have done since being a child. And when I got into healing, and I'm a complementary therapist, I didn't want to be sensitive or overly sensitive like some of my friends were. But now I realize actually I was oversensitive, and I used to faint regularly, but I thought that was normal. And since remote viewing and my training, I actually have fainted much less and thought I wasn't fainting anymore. But then I was midnight that year that I'd said I don't faint anymore, brought a faint by someone else's projection through his emotions. And then within a month, I had some other projection from another male, but not the same one. And I fainted again, but not immediately. It was sort of 4 or 5 hours after. So I know I need to protect myself, and I need to work with empathy, but not go into sympathy mode and be merging with them in a way that's not helpful. And if you've not experienced it, you don't realize. But then even less than 2 months ago, I took on somebody's symptoms totally of a medical situation, I'm like, why have I done that? I've done all this training. I really didn't think I would do that again, but I did do. But it took me a day or two to realise, and I just did some different sort of exercises with my body to help me get through that. And then I could help them more. But I had totally taken on their symptoms. And it was so debilitating. I was amazed at how ridiculously, really, I'd taken it on. So we really need to, and I've had times that I've been viewing with people and I was asked to speak to someone and the person wouldn't stop. So they said, look, you're doing a viewing thing. We can suspend time, so get them to stop. And they stopped and I talked to them and it turned out being the pop star Prince. This is before it died. And when I knew who I was viewing, because I was blind to it, it made sense afterwards. But he did not want to stop until we said, we're suspending time because we're remote viewing. And we are getting into such different areas of life through doing the remote viewing. And until you've been challenged with that and work with the ethics of it all, then you might think you can do it, but you will be sent something that actually, I need to be more mindful of it all, if that makes sense. Thank you. I've done.
Niam's here, actually. Niam, if you're still listening, you, I think it was last month, you predicted that Prince Philip would die. And he died today.
Yeah, I didn't say he would die, but I said
you said he was very ill.
Yeah, I saw him getting I saw someone getting a heart surgery, a heart replacement, and the following month, Prince Philip ended up getting a heart surgery. Yeah, that was interesting. And now he just passed, so I guess that didn't really hold up. I
was wondering though, in your RV, did you have any of the feelings of him having the heart surgery, or did you just kind of note that you experienced it from an outside position?
No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't feel any of the pain or anything. But I saw like doctor's hand with the blood, heart in it, and I just got that it was like a quick, succinct surgery, and I got like listeria. That's like a bacteria.
Why did he necessarily need to have any pain? Because he might not have done. He could have had a heart situation happening, and it's his energy withdrawing. Because I've done some soul midwifery training, and the elements of the body withdraw over years before the person dies. And he was 99, so inevitably the energies, the elements of his body would have been withdrawing for over the last 12 years or so. Is recognized easily, and some of the elements withdraw more quickly. And he had a heart stuff happening. And when you look at today, what I've seen of Prince Philip coming out of hospital on the 17th of March, it's no wonder he's dead now, but at least he'd gone home to die, relatively peacefully. So you will have picked that up, and so it doesn't have to be painful just because they're dying. There's a Buddhist approach to dying that they go away and actually they do a rainbow death thing. And the only thing that is left of their physical body is their nails and their hair to sort of say that they have died, they've gone. So we need to just get beyond all of this, don't we?
If we can,
Actually, looking back at my session, I wrote he's incapacitated, so I had that. So he's out. He was put out. So
good session, though. Well done. As we're talking about remote viewing life, just wonder what your guys' thoughts are on the ethics of that, because I have to be honest. Sometimes I struggle with it myself because ethically, it's probably not ethical to view any life at a target, but I do it continuously without a second thought at times when I'm actually in an RV. But afterwards, I think, oh, I wonder if it was right or wrong for me to have done that and saw that person when they were, doing, I don't know what they could have been doing at the time, but they could have been in pain or they could have been doing anything.
But ethically, Daz, you can actually help them move on. And we need to accept death as a part of life. And I know through my work as a complementary therapist and soul midwife and things like that, if we can actually help them to get some sort of peace and help the family and friends around them. And I've worked with people, literally, there was one particular person who all the family had been called to hospital because they knew he was dying. I think he was 96 at the time. And I'm like, yeah, I'll still come, but also not realizing quite what I was going into, but it felt right to go. And I walked into that hospital room. Honestly, it was a room full. I've never experienced that before. And they all left for me to give him reflexology. And I'm like, in my ego mind, I was thinking, what if this person dies while I'm with him and his family have been here all night and they've just disappeared to get a bit of refreshment? They came back and it was wonderful because he came round enough to acknowledge his daughter. And he wouldn't have done that if I hadn't have been there. And then I left, and an hour or so after, he did pass away. But I felt so privileged to be part of that. And I know there was another remote viewing thing I'd done on a second will that somebody had written. And I perceived that ethically I needed to not find this other will. And so I stopped. And so we need to just realize we don't need to prove what we're doing, but ethically, if we get to a certain stage and it feels right to not continue, then I'm sorry, you've paid us for what I've done, but I don't need to carry on anymore. And that's
what about other scenarios, for example, like for example, I've been asked by the police in America to track a suspect. Now, although the person is a suspect, if you look at it ethically, they're allowed the right to privacy and the right to a life until proven guilty. So is it ethical for a remote viewer to track someone just because the police asked them to, for example?
Well, it depends where the police are coming from and really what they've done. And I go for the highest good and greatest benefit. So, and I mean, there's been various other things I've done, and it's like, okay, that was stolen, but no, they need to keep it. And then you deliver that information, and it's like, okay, well, I know where it's gone, but ethically, they need it more. So you really just have to go with the flow of what you're doing, and just because they're police doesn't make it more justifiable that you continue. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. Like, for me, it's like it seems kind of like an ethical thing, and maybe like it is from like the perspective that most people are at. But if everyone kind of, if humanity as a whole realizes that consciousness is more interconnected, then, you know, from that perspective, it would be like kind of like Wi-Fi. It would be like, you know, you don't use a public Wi-Fi network. You don't go and put your information out there. Someone could easily get it. So right now it's like you're spying on someone, but maybe in the future it'll be more like, hey, everything's already connected. You should know that. Like, you know, everything can already be accessed. So
no, but when you say that, what do you actually mean about the ethics of the police and people? Because I know from my past experience, not all police stuff that they ask us to do is actually ethical. And so,
no, I'm not. I don't mean police in general. I just mean the idea of remote viewing a life. Yeah, like it seems like an invasion of privacy from the perspective that we all live on. But if we all knew about the extents of our mind, then more people would see it that way, that we're all connected. So people would act differently. You know what I mean? People act thinking I can get away right now. Whereas from a higher perspective, it would be like, it would know other people would be able to pick up on it. It would just be like a different understanding of the world, of how information works.
But this is also where people think just because you're psychic that you can read somebody else's mind. And that's not what we're doing. And I know remote viewing community have a bit of an issue with the term psychic, but other people don't within the remote viewing community. And it's like, well, we need to be ethical and check in with ourselves. Does it intuitively feel right to be viewing this? And that's where we need to really, that is our ethics. Does this really feel right? Why am I doing this? And that takes considering.
I'd like to share some thoughts that I wrote down from a human session. So when I remote view a front-loaded target that I know is a human, first of all, I do hear thoughts from them, and at first I considered it noise, but I always wrote it in my reports, and I started seeing a good correlation from what people are thinking against what is known about their lives. So it became more and more interesting. This person was some kind of a leader in India hundreds of years ago. And here are some of the thoughts that I wrote down from him. "Are you a grave robber, ma'am?" he asked me. And I'm skipping parts. And then he also said, "I know that I am being looked at, and I am going to warn you." He speaks directly to me. Would you let me sleep alone? I have made magic happen. I have somehow come back to life. Who has woken me up from the dead? He yelled very loudly. And I stopped the session. And then I had huge issues with the ethics of remote viewing humans, because it is my experience very often that when I see them, they see me and they start talking to me. They ask me, "Who are you? How did you come into my house?" It's very clear to me that I don't know if it's a simulation or if it's real, but I have an ethical issue with remote viewing humans because of the data I'm getting. So,
but that's where, when you think about if you were with a human person physically, would you do that? Would you go into their house? And yes, we do go into people's houses. We do meet up with people. So it's really about, just because it's remote viewing, do you behave any differently to what you would in everyday life? And okay, it's on a different level, different perspective and everything, but you know, in everyday life that there's certain people you'll come across in certain circumstances that don't feel comfortable. And this is a discussion I've had today actually with somebody, and it's like, well, it didn't feel right to do that, but there were all these circumstances, so I did it because I was feeling pushed into it. And I've done that in my life physically, and I'm glad I've done it in my life physically, and then realized afterwards I wished I hadn't done that. Instinctively I knew not to. And so since I've been doing the remote viewing, I think I've been better at saying, no, that's it. I don't care about your money that you might pay me. I don't care that I've got to prove that I can remote view, because I know I can. I know we all can. So it's more about why you're doing what you're doing. What does that mean to you, Anita, then?
Well, when I remote view a human target, there's no agreement between us that I'll be coming into their home. So I think of it as an invasion. And It's different than actually going into someone's house.
But do you actually ask them on a sort of remote viewing level of permission?
No, I try to be stealth about it. I don't want them to see me. But I have a huge issue with the integrity and ethics of it. I'm not sure if I want to remote view humans anymore because of it, because it's so, I get a lot of private thoughts from people. And yeah, it's a good question to consider.
But you can get,
obviously we will have human targets and we will pick up private information. It's not something we can avoid.
no, but also even if you're not doing a human target, there's ethical considerations there anyway. So it's not just about humans.
Yeah, I mean, there are broader ethical questions, like many people here, where a lot of us are playing around with ARV in ways to make money through remote viewing by predictions. Niam and myself do crypto viewing markets and gold markets and stuff, and I know Carl does lots of ARV because she does some for us and she does some for other people as well. Is that, we could ask ourselves, is that ethical, having a one up on the people that don't have that advantage? It's an interesting question. I don't have a problem with it myself, but some people might.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I'm touching upon what Anita said and also what Julie said. I think it depends. When it comes to people, I think it does depend. If you're remote viewing the whereabouts of a child killer, I think that's different to wanting to just nosily see what my neighbour's doing, or nosily wanting to see what my boyfriend's doing when he's not with me. It's a bit like astral traveling. There's ethics there as well, because I can astral travel. Would I astral travel to see what my neighbour's doing or my boyfriend's doing? No, I wouldn't. The same way, like with absent healings, I do Reiki as well. With absent healing, I wouldn't just assume to go and just send healing to my sister. One, I could send her a load of healing and she can't sleep that night. So I always get her permission. So I think when it comes to people, I think you should get their permission. If you don't know them, really be careful who it is, because going back to what Anita's saying, it is an ethical thing. And like I said, if you're remote viewing a child murderer or whoever doing something for the police and you're trying to find the location of this person or the location of this missing person, that's different to just wanting to, I think I'm going to go into the Queen's bedroom and see what she's doing.
But Heather, is it different now? I mean,
it is different. Yes, it is different.
But that's where.
But they're innocent.
I would question even the ethics on that, because if you think of Hitler, and he was a child who had significant health problems, if he hadn't have continued to live, would we have had to have gone through what we went through in World War II? And so when people say women and babies first type thing, well, actually, if he'd have been allowed to die, would we have had so many people dead? So the ethical considerations go much beyond what
I think what we need to do is always, and this is not just not remote viewing. I think we always have to ask ourselves, would I like it done to me? And me personally, I wouldn't want somebody to remote view me without my permission.
No, but also, what level of permission do you get? Your higher self? Because I, as a healer, I go to the higher self, and there's only once that I've been refused permission, and I acknowledged that and I accepted that. But then it's like, okay, so on that level, am I allowed to send healing to their house? And I was given that permission on that time. Okay. And then there was some other things came in, and it was done more effectively, not to give healing to that person, but to give healing to a receptacle that they can then access. So it's too easy to say, ethically, you don't do it unless it's to do with murder or whatever. That's too easy. That's our egos thinking. Whereas actually, every, butterfly flapping its wings changes the world, changes the weather. So what are we doing with any of this remote viewing if you go to that?
All right, so I'll put a question to you. A friend comes up to you and says to you, Julie, I have a funny feeling that bloke who lives down the road, that Daz guy, sorry, Dan, I'm just using it as an example, that Daz guy, he's, I think he's going to remote view you. How would you feel?
Well, I live my life. I'm not doing anything that, actually, if I'm doing anything that I shouldn't be doing, I'd rather them come and tell me. So
right, okay.
What you see is what you get with me. Sorry.
Okay.
But isn't there the whole issue of feedback? Like if I say I'm going to remote view someone,
if you think every single
I could say I saw someone do something, and it doesn't mean that's what they were actually doing, right? You'd have to go and you'd have to confirm that that person actually did that thing. So there's people who could say they're doing, but unless you get the feedback, you don't know if you're actually disclosing something about somebody. So you're going on the line where someone could just be imagining or just saying things, and now you're going to be saying they're intruding on someone's privacy. So
yeah, but it depends where you put in that. But if you realize that every single thought about another person is either strengthening their energy or weakening it, which I know through being a kinesiologist, it does. Even thinking no weakens your energy, unless you're in a person that thinks, yes, I'm thinking no, yes, I'm thinking no. But this is where every single thought, if you worry about somebody else, it weakens their energy. And I know that because of the different muscle testing responses that I've done before I even got into remote viewing. So once you realize that if you worry about someone, you're weakening their energy, remote viewing, yes, it is doing stuff, but as long as you're connecting with what feels ethical, then there isn't anything that you should or shouldn't be doing. You just go with what feels ethical, but get in touch with what is ethical as you're working.
As for ARV, if that's ethical, it was mentioned earlier. I actually wrote to my sports betting company and explained what ARV is and that I'm planning to use it, and asked for specific permission to use ARV, and they said, sure, go ahead. We just have a limit for how much you can win. And if you win beyond that limit, then we'll take a look at your account. But they didn't mind. I haven't made any profit yet, by the way, so it doesn't matter. But they did give me permission, and I was honest about using ARV, and it was okay. So that's one way
I want to say something about, so you're all talking about like looking at Hitler's thoughts as though it was a thing in the past. But out there's no time. So you can go and read what he was thinking whenever you want. There's no difference. On that side, you can read his thoughts in the future or whatever. So there's also that to consider.
I think in a way, sorry. I think in a way, all the discussions we're having is kind of like, humanity is going to start realizing the power of what we're doing all the time. So, we're just at the beginning of this. We feel like we're ahead of it, but really it's like, we're still learning as well. So right now we're doing remote viewing, we're doing these things. Perhaps in the future, it may be illegal or it may not, things may happen in the future, but
also if you think of past life and reincarnations and stuff like that, in the dimension of it all, and what is the future anyway? So, and we don't need to big ourselves up, do we? It's like, I'm amazed that I do what I do and I've perceived what I have, but also I know everybody else could do it. And I don't need to big myself up for it, but I would love every single person, every single child to be brought up knowing they can remote view and help the world, not use it, because I'm really not into the crypto and everything like that. And it's fine if people do, but it's just not my energy. But I did win some money on the lottery, not knowing that's what I was doing. So when all that comes up, okay, I accept that's a different life than what I do. But I also want to use this remote viewing to help humanity. And I don't know where we are with it all.
In terms of the ARV, like what Daz was saying, for me, if I can produce data that helps someone like make money, or I can make money, to me, I don't see an ethical problem with that. It's like a skill that you developed.
No, but money isn't life, is it?
No, I don't think it's life. I'm not saying that that's the sole purpose. I'm just saying it's an interesting experiment to use, because for most people,
but I've known
so many
people.
Unless there's
so many people with money.
For some people,
I've known so many people with money that ain't happy and ain't healthy, and actually could benefit much more from having much less. And okay, they can give money away for charities and stuff, but we shouldn't need charities for the basics of life. And so really, that's why I just can't do remote viewing for that. It's just not me. But
I see remote viewing as a powerful tool. And if we can show the uses of the tool, I think it'll make more people realize, what's going on, with the whole phenomenon. So I don't really care about making the money, but it's another way to reach another group of people who may have otherwise never looked at consciousness in that way. That's how I see the whole using it in markets and stuff like that. It brings more power to the people.
Yeah, it just bugs me that seems to be the way that remote viewing's going. And this last probably 4 years, it seems to have been so emphasized on that. And yet we could help people much more. But how can we get more accepted into, helping the police, helping with healthcare, helping with people in their everyday lives?
I think if we can do small things, like start showing that we can predict some cryptocurrencies, small stuff like that, more of the public will take it more seriously, which could lead to stuff like you're talking about, helping people in more real, direct ways. It's just people don't take it seriously right now. For most people, this is complete pseudoscience, and it's like, if you can get their interest in some betting thing, and they see it works, then maybe they'll say, okay, it works on this. What else does this lead to? That's how I see it. I do see it as a kind of a pathetic kind of thing. It's like, yeah, we're using this to bet on this stuff, but it's like,
really sad impact on life. And if that's all we're gonna do, I can't see why I'm even doing it. And
no, I didn't say all we're gonna do. I said that's what we're doing right now, because these are the ways that the public wants to consume it. There are people who want to see remote viewing used against cryptocurrencies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
it's not that's all we want to do. It's not that that's what
all you're doing is feeding their materialistic view of life, and that ain't helping our communities. And all we're doing is
cryptocurrencies are helping people. It is empowering people in ways. People are taking their financial life back in their own hands. So there's different perspectives to look at it. It's not just all it's materialism. It's not.
So Judy, do you think that RV shouldn't be used for any financial use at all then?
It really, honestly, it bugs me so much, and probably I'm putting a lot of my background on here as to my marriage, that I met someone who was just working for the factory shop floor and then became managing director and stuff. And marriage breakdown and all that lot, and he was traveling the world, and I know that money has not helped him, but he was in touch with loads of people with loads of money. And it's like I just don't get where all this focus is on money, when we could be doing so much more, so much better to help people in everyday life. In Mansfield, where I live, in Nottinghamshire, in the United Kingdom, we've got homeless that we've had on the streets for the last so many years, which I'd never known before. And yet me doing crypto stuff would not help them.
But Judy, it would though. That's a bit single-minded. For example, I have emails from our patrons, saying thank you. We've helped secure their family a future by them making money off of the information we give them.
No, but what families are you actually helping? Are you really helping your community to connect?
Well, we're helping the people that we get the information to, because they thanked us for helping them. You know,
No,
and they thanked us for giving information that's in some cases possibly helped save their lives.
It's just, I mean, I've worked with drug and alcohol rehab clients and people like that, and it really just, you know, if I could help the whole of Mansfield connect better through remote viewing, then I would do. But so far, I haven't managed to suss how to do that. And if I just help individuals and then they get, oh, we're giving this to charity or whatever, well, why do we even need charities? And to me, it's just feeding that charity need. And that's what I just can't cope with.
I think there's room for balance in doing both.
Sorry,
you know, I do lots of free stuff, and I do paid stuff, but I refuse to do anything paid personally for 20 years of RV work that I was involved in. It's only the last 3 years that I'm now starting to take a little bit of payment in return for what I do, but I still try to give as much free as I can. So personally, for me, it's a balance thing, but I think there's room for both.
Can I say something? Yeah, I agree with you, Daz. I have no interest in doing this IRV to put money into my account at all. If Spirit thinks I'll get money, then they'll put money in my account. but at the same time, there's a school of thought in the spiritual world that you cannot focus on money and be spiritual at the same time. That's completely wrong. And also, I'm not Christian, but I am going to reference a Christian saying, and it goes like this: hate the sin, not the sinner. People tend to think that saying that money is the root of all. It isn't. It's nothing. It's not the money. It's the user of that money. There's nothing wrong in wanting to win the lottery, be rich, get a big house, get a fan. There's nothing wrong with that if it makes you feel genuinely happy. Ideally, it would be nice if you could just spend thousands on helping other people, the homeless and the villages in other parts of the world where they're starving. It would be, but there's nothing wrong in putting yourself first and putting a value on yourself. I mean, you were saying, Daz, that that you got money for something you charge. There's nothing wrong with that. So I don't think we should evilize money.
We don't need to evilize it.
We don't need to evilize it, and it's okay for people to do this ARV. I've heard of it, but I don't know what it really is. But because I'm relatively new to all this, so there's nothing wrong in people doing this to put money in their banks. It's not my thing, but there's nothing wrong with it.
It's okay for them to do that, but when we focus on love instead of sin, then that's a much better focus.
So and you're saying money is sin, because money isn't sin.
No,
it's how that money is recycled can determine whether or not it's sinful or it's good. It's how it's recycled, how it's used.
So why have we not got clean water and proper sewage systems for every single community in the world?
That's nothing to do with money. That is to do with corruption. And that corruption is mainly born out of the West.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
About the corruption and why, if money is the answer, why hasn't everything been fixed yet? It's because the money system we currently use is controlled in a certain way. Corruption. And so cryptocurrency is actually something that gives a lot of economic freedom to people in countries who don't have a bank account, who don't have access to financial stuff. So the homeless people you're talking about will actually benefit from cryptocurrency. Okay. So I dropped a link in the chat, a presentation by Roger Ver, who talks about economic freedom and the life expectancy and jobs and things that actually increase people's quality of life is directly linked to their amount of financial freedom they have. And cryptocurrency is the most empowering tool that we have right now to bring financial freedom to people who don't have access to economic activity. And so by doing the ARV in cryptocurrency, we are actually giving a benefit, because we're spreading not only remote viewing, but we're actually bringing awareness to cryptocurrencies as well, which is a very powerful tool for economic freedom. So just you got to think about it in more ways than how we've been taught, because we've been programmed a certain way to think of it a certain way. But people created new tools. Cryptocurrency is a new tool. So you gotta educate yourself on cryptocurrencies first before it does seem like another scam. It seems like that, like, oh, another thing, another money thing. But it's like, this is actually a powerful tool, in my personal opinion. And I've been into it for like many years now.
Yeah,
but
I have to.
Cryptocurrency is just another form of money. And so we've still got people trying to strive to get that, when we've still, if you go into various countries in the world, like Kenya, India, Nepal, you've got people with loads of money or whatever, crypto or whatever, and then across the road, literally, they haven't even got clean water. They're having to go to ditches that are within the other parts of the world, in their local community, but they've got to literally go to ditches to get clean, not even clean water, to get water, and they've not got a sewage system. And they could easily be given all that I mean, I've been to Kenya, India and Nepal, that it's so just round the corner across the road, and yet any crypto is not helping them.
Well, not a lot of people even know about cryptocurrencies yet. So it's in its budding stages, but watch that video I posted. You know, it's a short thing, but you know,
I'll watch it.
Currency is just money, and currency is just an exchange of energy. It's just the way that we exchange energy and value. It's just a tool. So cryptocurrency it's putting that tool in our hands now. It's not, the bank is not, the government's not going to tell you how you can transact. We'll be able to do it ourselves. So that would actually allow people to give those people the things they need, or they'll be able to actually go and make money themselves now, because they could actually get access to it. Those people want to make money themselves. They want to make their own living. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of them don't literally have no access to it. They don't have IDs. They don't have all the stuff we have. And cryptocurrency.
A lot of people have more quality of life than we've got.
Judy, how do you think we could help these poor using remote viewing?
That's where I'm still trying to explore, and I'm still waiting for that answer. And it's like we need and I'm sure we're getting to a paradigm shift anyway in the world, that with all this last year that we've had, we've got to have a significant shift in opening stuff up to actually help people that are on the streets, that are those people without electricity, without clean water, without sewage systems. But while ever we keep in our little community online and everything, we're not meeting them, are we?
I understand that. I just don't see how we can help the poor people, you know, who don't have water, who don't have food, using a skill like remote viewing, other than in ways like we're doing with crypto viewing, by making people more aware that they have their own financial freedom, and giving them a little bit of a hint on how to increase that financial freedom through the tips and the advice we give them. I don't understand. I can't work out how I would help them any other way with RV to get water and get food. That would be a hard one.
Even if it was just sort of helping them to realize how to get the clean water.
But we know how to do that. They just need the tools. They need the pipes and the physical things to drill for the water to do it, which costs money, of course.
So we could use remote viewing, remote influencing in an ethical way to do that?
I don't know. I've never been involved in, or never want to be involved in, doing anything that's involving remote influencing in any way. So that would be up to me.
Every thought that you have is a form of remote influencing. And so once you realize that, it really is, Daz.
It may be possible. I don't consciously do it. I don't consciously go out of my way to influence people in a certain direction.
No, but therefore, if you could use your thoughts for remote influencing, and I mean, I'm just getting into dream intention and stuff, and that to me is where remote viewing could go, and keeping that ethical consideration as you're doing it.
Yeah. For the people that's just joining, we're just having a really kind of in-depth talk at the moment on all the different kinds of ethics within remote viewing, you know, and it started off with, is it ethical to remote view people at target locations, and then, you know, write down and distribute, you know, what may be their faults, you know, the kind of place that they live, that kind of thing. So we started off with that kind of discussion, and it's progressed into other ethical things, really. And I don't think any of us have any solutions on it. I mean, you know, I keep going back to the case of, I was asked by the police to RV a suspect in a missing person case who the police suspected had killed someone. They asked me to RV it, which I did. But when thinking back on it, you know, and the laws, because it was an American case, the laws in America, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty. Is it right for me to use my abilities to hunt down someone who is essentially innocent until proven guilty when they have the rights to privacy? So it's ethical things like that we were discussing, and we have some quite different feelings on it at this stage. Bear with me a second. I've got to admit some people here. So yeah, if any of you new people that have joined have any thoughts on that, that'd be interesting to hear.
I always liked, or not liked, but it was interesting to me on Reddit, on the remote viewing group, somebody had asked, this is months, maybe even like a year ago, and they were saying, you know, can you please help me find this missing person? And so I thought, oh, what a great application of remote viewing. But then basically the community turned them down. And so it brought up the idea of ethics. And one comment that stuck with me was that you don't know if that person is the mother of that missing child or the estranged husband who is abusive looking for their kid. So because of those reasons, you just have to kind of put your hands up.
Yeah, I totally agree. In the case of the police, it's a hard one, and I only ever worked not only. After I had an unfortunate incident with the police, I only then ever worked on cases where I was asked to work. On the very first case, where I sent in information from a remote viewing group that I trained here in Bath on a local rapist, I sent their details into the police, and that actually made me a suspect in the case. So I had the police come to my house. They tried to take fingerprints. They tried to take DNA samples. I had a 6-month-long battle with the police. So that taught me not to send anything in unsolicited, because, you know, you don't know what it's going to do. Because, you know, in some of these cases, and especially the serial killer cases, what they call the unsub tends to try to get themselves involved in the case from a distance. And I guess that's what they thought I was trying to do when I was handing over information. But it's really interesting, this ethical debate. Yeah, but as we were saying, you know, Judy was saying, could we find ways to maybe use remote viewing to help people less fortunate than ourselves, other than the focus that seems to be quite prolific within remote viewing at the moment, which is based around ARV and, you know, people making money and sports betting and all that kind of stuff. So if you have any thoughts on that, let us know, you know, in the voice or in the chat there.
One person that goes a lot into the ethics of missing people is Pam Coronado. And those ethics are real solid. We worked a couple of live cases, and one idea that came up that was very interesting to me: does the person themselves want to be found? And that's a criteria, obviously, that you can't verify. But I had one really interesting experience where it was, and what happens, the way Pam does it, is she gives you cold cases or cases that are already closed, so there's feedback. And then once in a while, a live case will come in there. When I went to do a live case, my advanced visual, and it was like, you know, it was just stated, this person does not want to be found. And that was interesting because it was out of the blue. I wasn't thinking about it. There was no basis. It just straight up, before I even took the coordinate, came in solid. So was that my imagination or whatever? Of course, we don't know, but that is a big consideration. What if somebody left and they're doing something and they have no interest in being found?
And I know I've had some cases that something was stolen and we viewed it, and the person that was viewing it was totally blind, and we got to a certain point, and what they were telling me was that we needed to not continue ethically, and I had to feed back to that person that I actually know very closely, and well, this is the information, and yes, it was stolen, but ethically they need it, and okay, it's not right that they stole it, but they need it, and so please just let it be what it is. And we didn't continue. And I would hope that every remote viewer will get to a point and notice when ethically, if it is an ethical situation, that they don't continue, and they really respect that. And I don't know if everybody would, because I think sometimes people are so busy trying to prove themselves that they can do it, and it's like, no, just let it go and get your ego out the way and don't have to prove it, because we know we can do it.
Anyone else got any thoughts to add on the ethics of remote viewing, or should we try a different topic?
Hey, Daz, here's Pablo.
Hi there.
Hello. So, two thoughts came to me when this discussion started, and the first one is that sometimes people really wants to help, as you mentioned, but that doesn't mean that they are not getting emotional about it or that they are completely ready for that. So that's another part of the ethics, whether you will be actually helping or you will need to back up a little bit before you actually know if you can help. I will be quoting Paul's blog. He has that post where he mentions, should you contact authorities? And he says, no, wait for it. It's not that simple. And that's our responsibility as remote viewers, as well with anything else, right? And the other thought that is coming to my mind is that this will be used on need basis, right? There's a lot of people trying to solve really old cases. That's interesting, right? Closure. But there are sometimes that there are really important things and you may need to prioritize, right? What do you want to do? You want to do all those targets, which you may never get feedback, or this other target that you may end up helping and get feedback in the end, right?
That's where I feel we need to not have to need feedback. I know it's nice, and particularly early days, we sort of need that feedback to help us to know that we're doing what we're doing. But once you really trust that you are doing the remote viewing and you do it ethically, you actually don't need feedback. Occasionally it's nice to get some, and it's like, oh yeah, we found whatever, a passport that we found, or we found an earring that somebody else needed, I perceived a dead body, etc., etc. And I've had enough of that feedback. So the other times that I'm viewing, I don't actually need the feedback because I just trust the situation and the whole process. And that's where control remote viewing is so incredible compared to other types of remote viewing, even with control remote viewing as a basis. That's.
I have a
I'll
comment.
jump. Okay.
This one will be
Keep
quick,
going,
sorry.
Ian.
In terms of like the ethics and people, like maybe we could come to agreement as remote viewers as to what's ethical and what's not. But you know, one of the wider questions, I guess, would be if something is deemed ethical or non-ethical, it's like, how would that be enforced? You know what I mean? Like this is everyone's mind here. So it's like, it's a very dangerous question. It's like, you know, you're playing with what can you think about now? So it's like, what's ethical, but then it's also who's going to enforce the ethics? You know what I mean? So that's another question.
There's only you that can enforce it. And actually, that's the only danger. So if you are comfortable with what you're doing, then you're being ethical. And I personally wouldn't want to go beyond what I'm comfortable doing and what I perceive as comfortable.
Well,
Hi.
Gail Husick has made a whole video that's available on YouTube about doing the due diligence and only going through law enforcement. And in fact, like Pam Coronado, they both have detective licenses so that they can communicate with law enforcement and be sure about what they're doing. The video's there on YouTube.
It would seem that even if there's not an enforcement, it would seem that even if there's not an enforcement mechanism that's practical, that just having a general discussion like this about where are the boundaries and what are the relevant principles that should be applied is itself a helpful educational effort that would improve the ethics in practice.
To put another point on the concept of ethics as opposed to moral. Ethics in the overall professional sense is a codified behavior list. And everybody who becomes a quote professional, whatever, signs on to it. I don't care if you're an attorney, a nurse, a doctor, a veterinarian. There's a code of ethics that you're supposed to sign on to be licensed. Okay, now, we all know people who, in quote, that have codes of ethics. And ethics, you know, that's a piece of paper that you signed on to get your license to do something. Moral, which from the discussion is what I'm hearing is this right or wrong? Is this going to hurt someone or help someone? And that's an entirely different discussion about do I know the absolute end, the outcome that should happen? Now, I always use the phrase that may be above my pay grade, because being moral is a much more challenging part of life than being ethical. Just from my experience being licensed in different occupations.
Yeah, if I could expand upon that, I totally think that delineation is really important here, because ethics is societal. It's what society believes. Code of conduct is exactly what you said. So you see that in law, you see that in a number of other things, whereas morals are very different. It's what you personally believe. And so obviously all viewers are at this point probably just doing what morally feel is true. And I have a call, so that's my piece.
But that's where, Brett, I think it's different culturally throughout the world. And particularly this last year, I've had much more contact in different parts of the world, and particularly through the remote viewing community. And to realise that what you think is normal in your part of the world, even when we get into talking about ethics and moral stuff is what I call ethics. And I hadn't realised I had until Ida said that. And so it's interesting that even that is so cultural. Yeah, it's just amazing. So thank you.
Excellent.
Well, I don't know what country you're in, but if you look up the professional disciplines, wherever there's to get a license to be a fill in the blank professional, whatever, they will sign a document for the code of ethics, which may or may, I mean, they may or not follow it. Just think about attorneys or doctors who prescribe medications that they shouldn't or whatever. But that's just a piece of paper that they say, okay, I will do this and I won't do that. Moral is something that you're basically taught. Now, I'm not saying that works either, because there are people who taught that, you know, power is everything, and you know, disabled people don't have any rights, and certain other people don't have any rights, and only if you or a male, white, under the age of 65, or you have X number of dollars in the bank, do you have any rights? I mean, that's pretty much a cultural, a Western cultural aspect. And that's what I'm basing my experience on.
But that's where I do, even when you talk about licenses, in the United Kingdom, we don't have so many licenses as you do. And so that's not our first terminology. Certainly not for my experience of life in the Midlands of the United Kingdom. So that's where it's amazing how different our daily life experiences is to even expect that license need. And I think Daz understands a bit more of what I'm meaning from when you've nodded your head. And so ethics and morals are, to me, equated, but obviously it isn't for everyone.
Okay, yeah, that's a difference. I've met so many psychotherapists from the UK who are not licensed and never went to school, but they hold themselves out as counselors, therapists, and all this, that I keep waiting for something terrible to happen here and someone to go to prison for it. But, you know, so far they claim that they're only proffering advice, please, you know, blah, blah, blah. They have a little disclaimer. So yes, I understand that part of it. And doctors, I mean, when they come to the US, they have to go through a lot of retraining. I mean, I know a lot of doctors who have emigrated to the US and they've become nurses because the retraining takes so long and licensure is really tightly controlled. So yes, now that I know where you're from, Julie, I understand.
And it's interesting that as a complementary therapist, I've been so involved in getting complementary therapies recognised as professional standards. And it's almost, we've been fighting to have a licence. And yet I'm like, why are we fighting for this when the year 2000, the House of Lords did a report, and because we don't kill people, they didn't need us to be statutorily regulated. So eventually we're now having to be voluntarily regulated. And it's just, you know, a crazy world, isn't it? Yeah.
I suppose beauticians here need a lot more verified training hours than so many other here in Texas, a ND, a naturopathic doctor, there is no recognition of their license, their training, or your insurance won't pay them. However, in Arizona and California, they do. So you see, in the United States, it's not even a level playing field.
But also, is that actually making it better through the licensing? So to me, if we could minimize all of that, we could actually get remote viewing out there more and be using it more helpfully for people. Let's minimize all that legislation, all that paperwork, and get us out there.
Okay,
working.
but what do we do about the people that some of us think are working within remote viewing that may be working unethically? I don't want to mention any names of people that might be prophesizing doom and destruction, if I can say it in that way.
Because you get that in every single area of life. And when I was a child, teenager, young adult, there were certain, particularly police and doctors, dentists, opticians, whoever, that were behaving immorally, but they got away with it. And now we're actually realizing that that isn't appropriate just because they've got that power. And we're actually now starting to challenge that and to say this ain't right. So it's more about, let's get more transparency, minimize the paperwork, help us to actually connect. And some people can be incredible remote viewers and have had minimal training, and even if they get into the control remote viewing, which I really do feel is a different way of working and gives a different level, but it's more about deciding what we really want for this and who are they helping.
I understand that, but at the same time, we do have elements within our overall larger community that are acting immorally and unethically. So how do we as a community approach that?
Well, the more we can connect properly, the more their voices will be so distanced, and we will be showing them the more ethical, the more moral, the sort of way that we can use remote viewing positively. And once they realize that, I'm sure I know as I've worked in different areas of life, there's been certain people that I avoid because I don't trust them. But the rest of the community, I will trust. And it is really, you'll get it everywhere.
I understand how we can do that from inside the community. But from people outside of our community that just use us as remote viewing services, they don't get to see our community side of it. They just get to see these products and people out there promoting in an unethical and immoral way, and that's their only point of contact. And they're, we have to be honest, as a community, that kind of thing is going on and every day.
Yeah, but advertising, the best form of advertising is one-to-one, mouth-to-mouth, nothing else. And you might get some people that sort of come to you through an advert or whatever, but recommendation is the best. And we just need to keep ethical, keep moral, and keep doing it, and realize, yes, it will take time, but that is a much better sounder foundation that we can develop. And okay, I mean, there's certain people in the complementary therapies community, I will only recommend people that I know genuinely. And there's certain people that, well, there's only one or two that I'm like, oh, okay, you're seeing them, right? Okay, well, that's your choice. And it'll only be when certain things happen that I will say, well, actually, and I know some people that have actually physically damaged people and got them sort of on platinum paying plans and things. And it's like, only if I've really needed to engage with them have I said, well, actually, that person, I think, avoid them and come here. So that's all we need to do. And we've got such a wonderful, strong community in the remote viewing. And I mean, this last year, through these Zooms that you, Daz, have been particularly a very key point of, and Russell, have really helped this community to gel worldwide. And we just need to don't focus on those that are not doing us any good, but we keep the focus on what we are doing and those that we actually trust. And we don't need to keep shouting. It's like, even with my grandchildren, I've introduced them to the concept of don't think of a blue monkey. Okay, you're now thinking of a blue monkey, aren't you? I said, don't think of that blue monkey. And then it's like, okay, if we keep focusing on those people and bringing their names to the fore, people will think, oh, I've heard that name. And I'm not going to mention the name now because I've heard it often enough and I've seen different videos with that person and I don't want to be associated with them. But the more I keep hearing them, the more other people are. And it's like, you're actually giving them an advert. So don't focus on them. Keep us as a strong community and keep doing what we're doing and get out there with our positivity rather than, oh, but what about them?
Well, perhaps one option that might be of use would be a kind of equivalent of the Better Business Bureau. I don't know if you have that in the United Kingdom, but it's an association of businesses that agree to adhere to certain principles, and they then advertise themselves as members of the Better Business Bureau, saying we've agreed to adhere to these principles. And there are people who are their customers who will look to see if a particular business is a member of the Better Business Bureau. It seems to me that IRVA is something like this, but perhaps a stronger version of IRVA, or one that had, more select requirements about who gets to advertise as a member of it, might be able to play a role like this.
Yeah,
But
that might work.
Through complementary
This is Tom
therapies.
McNear.
Yeah.
On the chat box, I posted an ethical decision-making model that I learned when I was getting my master's in psychology. And it's beneficence. The decision I'm getting ready to make, will it do good? The next is non-maleficence. Will it do no harm? And it seems obvious if it's doing good, it won't do any harm. But when you really dig into it, you find out those are two entirely different things. So will this decision do good? Will it do no harm to anyone? Justice is the third area. Is this a just decision? And then autonomy. Does it allow for the autonomy of the individual? And if you come through those four categories, it helps you to make an informed decision. And sometimes only 3 of them will support one decision and 1 will be against it. And then you have to make that decision. But that is a really good way to walk through any of the tough decisions you might find yourself trying to make.
And I love that approach much more than trying to set up a sort of organisation that the public won't know about and don't understand. And it's really word of mouth is your best form of getting us out there. And if we only recommend people that we really trust as we go forwards, then we're helping us to get out there. And don't try and keep each client to yourself, and recommend others that you trust.
But my
Great
point
point, guys.
here, I wanted to share is that when Das was asking his questions to you, Julie, I possibly I'm really positive today, and probably has something to do with the stars today, or because it's Friday. But there's a good example of a community that decided to do the good thing, and that's why we can have faith in people. Let's see the space technology. From an engineering point of view, any country that already has a satellite out up there could be bombing anywhere, easier than what they have today. And all the people in these decided not to do it. They even signed some commitments, but independently of those commitments, it's been like 40 plus years without any problem from space. So we can have that kind of faith in remote building. Jan was asking me, and I took Ingo's book here, just to read that small piece that he says, in any event, one of the results of all this is that people who do achieve biopsychic awareness become, among other things, pacifists and humanitarians sometimes, of no mean reputation. So that's something that if we think that the biomind is way above us, then we can trust that things will get into the right due course. Probably there will be outliers, but we've seen so far that most of the people doing remote viewing is not like a famous terrorist or something like that, right? Just wanted to share that.
Thanks for that, Pablo. Ida, you've had your hand up for a while. Is it up by accident, or you have something?
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to take it down. Now I forgot where it is.
That's okay. Yeah, thanks for all that, guys. I mean, it's really interesting to hear everyone's viewpoint on it. It's it's an interesting topic, and I myself and many others have had this conversation loads of times over the last 12, 15 years as we've seen things unfold. It's a particularly hard one for me because being a person kind of like in front of the community a little bit, I do get quite a lot of emails, and for example, I won't mention any names, but I had an email exchange very recently over someone that was selling alleged remote viewing services and that person selling the services actually conned the person they were doing the services to out of 5 lots of £10,000 at a time. So £50,000 of their money was gone, from this person selling these RV services that are dubious at best. So, this kind of thing is going on a lot out there in the community, and I had to help this person try to put some evidence together based on, tender, no, that's not remote viewing. That's not how we work. Here's the details of it, so that she could then go to the police and try to sort something out. So it's a subject that's, at my heart quite a lot, because that's not the only instance I've had. I've literally had people in emails crying because certain people that promote certain products about the end of the world have told them that they need to find their sanctuary, and they themselves have spent and given away their entire life savings to try to find these things, because that's what they've been told, and that's what they believe, because they don't have any ever exposure to the rest of us in our own little houses in our own little community, because our RV community is only a niche. You have to bear in mind, it's only a niche of a much larger psychic kind of ecosphere that's out there. So yeah, it's just something that's really in the forefront of my mind all the time, is how ethical can we be, and can we find ways to maybe make ourselves more ethical, to then make the people that aren't as ethical stand out that little bit more. So
and that's where, when the American elections were happening, there was so much discussion in the remote viewing community about all that they didn't seem to realise just how they were remote influencing how everybody was feeling, let alone what the elections might come out with. And that's where, that to me is an ethical and moral responsibility we have to, well, why are we viewing this? And to me, at times, that was getting so, just wanting to sort of know the outcome, but almost trying to influence it. And some of them were in such doom and gloom about it. I just had to step away from it all, because I knew they were remote influencing how everybody was feeling, let alone the outcome. And that's what we really need to consider ethically and morally, of why are we viewing this? Are we viewing it for an ego thing that I can then say, oh, well, I got that result? And why? Why do you need to get that result? What are we trying to really prove? There's loads of other things we could be using the remote viewing for that really will help humanity or beyond, if some people want to go there.
I'm all up for helping. If anyone wants to put together some humanitarian based projects, then I'm sure we could get a serious group of people involved to do that. I just don't. To be honest, in the 20 odd years of doing this, I haven't seen that much of a focus going down that route so far. It's not garnered that much attention. But I'd be happy to participate in something like that. Let's have a look. Have we got any questions here? I don't think we got any questions. Has anyone got any questions in the chat window, or in the voice that you want to talk about or discuss or share?
Yes. I was wondering, what do you think about like the Minority Report type situation, or maybe Tom or Russell? What do you that type of situation in the future? It may get to the point where there's enough people seeing future type events, around acting on those. What do you think about that type of situation? Even with the government, even maybe. Well, obviously that already kind of happened, but in a world where it's more openly accepted.
I guess I could start on this. RV wise, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know where I stand on that. I do know that, because I look at a lot of technologies, that a lot of police forces, especially here in the UK, where we have cameras pretty much on every street corner, they are using predictive AI technologies based on people's movements and situations in city centers and stuff, and it's so accurate that they can, to a certain degree, pre-predict when crimes are going to happen. So I know that the AIs and the algorithms and the technologies there to do that. I don't know how our RV would filter into that in any way, But yeah, I do know, you know, physical technologies there that's doing that, and that's scary in itself. You know, being able to accurately predict movements of humans in city centers and knowing a night or a few hours in advance that there's going to be a potential crime that's going to happen just from that alone.
I've predicted several with precognition. I've prevented and avoided several dangerous situations, which were later confirmed.
Excellent.
And I'm grateful for it.
But this is where even the psychology of people, they've sort of proved with things like there was some football stadium incident, and now they've realised that if they do certain things with the environment, people won't be so likely to just follow the crowd to a certain direction and all die. And actually, if they do certain things in the environment, then people are more likely to access and get out and be safe. And it's like the psychology of driving, having done speed awareness and driver awareness courses. If there's a corner that's got a tree on it, people focus so much on the tree, they end up hitting it and potentially dying, or at least having an accident. So it's like, once we get the psychology of life in there that they are starting to access with artificial intelligence, then we can understand people better. And that's where what we do with the remote viewing is actually understanding the psychology and people better. And if we could use that to enhance artificial intelligence, possibly that's the way that we could go forwards for them.
To answer your question as well, Liam, as you know, because you know you're doing the crypto viewing with us, this last year alone, I don't know if the rest of you noticed, but I've seen a huge explosion of companies and operations now that are starting to use predictive RV to in real world situations. You know, we're doing the crypto viewing thing. I know Brett Stewart's got his own. I think he's got his finger in several ARV kind of predictive pies. I know Carl's doing a lot of ARV work for people as well. We got the APP Marty Rosenblatt team. You know, for decades they've been doing some serious work. And we've also now got this. I don't know if you guys know about this, but we got this ARV contest.com that's on the scene as well. Whereas you can do that, and you know the first 3 top people each, I think, is each week or every other week, can win serious amounts of money. So it's really opening up in a big way, and I think people are starting to use predictive RV and remote viewing services in a predictive manner quite a lot more now than I've seen in many years previous.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I don't know why, but there's so many interested parties. There's a lot of very interested investors out there, and there's a lot of teams. I mean, there's a lot of teams. I mean, I know Eeyore's team is going on, and they're doing really well. That's one you didn't mention. And yeah, I think it's, you know, if you want to remote view for a living kind of a thing, you know, here's definitely one opportunity. There's obviously other ways to do it, but, you know, build a track record. This is a very cool way, at least to me. I think it's cool to kind of get to participate. I do think doing more than just ARV is probably beneficial as a viewer than only ARV, because there is I don't take the extreme position where ARV is detrimental. I view it more as like, well, if you only eat, you know, potato chips, well, you know, that has a certain diet, right? It's like ARV is like maybe a potato chip, you know, still you got to go out there and get some protein and some other stuff. That would be good too, like operational tasks and, you know, some other more, you know, interesting targets, things like that would be helpful for your RV diet. But yeah, no, there's a lot of interest in ARV these days by people in the financial world.
Bread, chips or fries? Because we can get into big discussions with that.
Yeah, I don't know. Something like that.
Brett, maybe for some of the people that don't know this is that we should try to compile a list or a list of resources, so you know that people can maybe inquire on this, because you know as we both know there's tons going on at the moment. This year has been a huge explosion.
Yeah, it's That might be possible. It's a slightly difficult because I know there's a lot of, I mean, obviously I don't have my pulse on everyone who's out there. I have my pulse on several. I mean, I'm involved in a couple.
Some are secret.
but
Yeah.
That's some of them are private because they don't want any public recognition whatsoever because they have other things that are front facing in the financial world that they don't want associated with psychics, which I get. Like, I totally understand that because they might lose clients for if that came out that they're also running this little secret project that's making them money with RV. You know what I mean? They're believers. They know it works because they're making money with it, but they see it potentially as a liability. So maybe it's the kind of thing where it's like the list is points of contact. Like if there's an individual out there who has a track record or is like saying, I practiced, here's my portfolio of work kind of thing, just like you want to do anything. Like whether it's to you, Daz, because I know you guys, crypto viewing, I'm sure always looking for really good viewers at some point, or someone like Eeyore, or someone like me, or someone like Marty, it's like, well, here's some people you can reach out to with past experience, and here were the results. And that would be actually a really interesting thing. Like if you put that, just like, so here are people to talk to about if you're interested in, financial stuff with AR, with remote viewing, like a list, maybe put that on your website or on the Facebook. I'm not sure how that would go, but that might be useful. Yeah, I can see how that would be useful.
Yeah,
because just because you're in one team doesn't mean you can't be in another team either as well.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if you're behind the ARV contest thing, Daz, or if it's Brett, but whoever's behind it, that's a genius, man. Competition creates an incentive, and it's like putting that out there will make at least some more people, want to strive to be better at this and build their skills. So I think that's a great idea. So kudos.
I do
to
think it's
whoever.
cool that. I do agree. I agree. I think it's cool that there's money that's interested in. I mean, obviously, the purpose of that, which I think has been explained in a couple of groups, is for scouting talent is the purpose of that. So I know I've spoken with people behind it, which is why, I've done some work for them, the people who are putting that contest on. And so this is why I recommended it just on my own kind of social media channels, because I know that they're good for the money. They're not screwing anyone over. And all they're really doing is looking for remote viewing talent for financial markets. I think that's cool, though. I don't think we've really seen this before, at least since I've been around remote viewing, where there's people saying, hey, if you're really good, we'll pay you. And that's the extent of the relationship, which, I mean, that's an incentive. There's more to remote viewing than just money, obviously. But yeah, no, I agree. It is kind of neat.
Yeah, I think it validates it. Any serious skill in the world, someone's going to be getting compensation for it usually. So I don't see why remote viewing should be any other way. So I think it's a good look.
Yeah.
One thing I remember in the first live training I took with Ed Dames, he had told a story about a viewer who was working on some finances for what you call a wholesome function, and then later went way too far and went into a streak of improbable misses. And Ed suggested at that point that he then from that incident started to consider whether or not the matrix, has a filter on it. I think when it comes to ethics, especially psychic ethics, I myself believe there's got to be something like a filter or checks and balance, or if you are breaking any of the codes that Tom presented, there might be intrinsic kickback. My position, for instance, on an ethical thing, let's say that somebody gets an ARV tip, they make a lot of money, they go buy a car that's out of their league, they get in an accident and kill 5 people. Where does that fall? Well, it would fall generally, like Tom said, autonomy on the individual. But if you hadn't given them that tip, would 5 people still be alive? And that's where I think the difference Tom was making. I can't actually pronounce the second word, the mal. Anyways, good versus, or benevolent versus malicious. Okay, I'll keep it simple. So yeah, it's good in one sense that this person got money, but in the end, was it? And especially if it involved other people. So let's take it down from the psychic realm down to just the regular human realm. We can, with our waking consciousness, make financial decisions that are good or bad. And the whiz kids, so to speak, the Wall Street people, they tend obviously to be on the very high end of good predictions, whether they're using AI or not. To me, if we consider the universal term source, that which brought consciousness, brought us, brought whatever into existence, you know, clear back to yogic legends through Christianity and so forth, you know, we've been given these gifts, these abilities, this touch, this sight, all this. Are we going to just use it to make money for ourselves? Or are we going to find a way to bring it into usefulness to benefit not what's called the greater good, but to actually produce well-being for real to the rest of us, the ones we share the planet. So sometimes I get a little chip on my shoulder where here's this amazing thing called remote viewing, and right away, and I'm not speaking against anybody, I admire, support, everybody knows that, but to serve ourselves or to serve others, or ideally a balance. I mean, we have to serve ourselves enough to be well and healthy and happy to be of benefit to others. So there's that balance. So when I see people that are purely say, oh, there's a gift from source, how can I get more with it? I personally find myself a little bit opposed to that. When it comes to myself and the operational sessions I do for Gail and Sandra and one other group, every session I do, I look at as reciprocity. And then when money has been offered as pay, I just have them put it to their favorite animal organization to put it back out there, because I'm so damn grateful for the increased perception, you know, for the training. That's just me. I wouldn't, you know, a lot of people could say there is a prosperity doctrine in religion. And so, yeah, of course, you know, be happy, be healthy, have plenty, share your plenty. So anyways, that's just kind of my thought. I mean, it's a very nebulous area. I truly don't believe there'll be any way to monitor, enforce, or track. I mean, there's so many people popping up doing this, calling it remote viewing. You know, it's out of control. But the core community, something like Jimmy said a little bit toward the notion of a better business community, where, or a better business bureau, where people, where there's just, you know, in a certain way, like Daz, that one issue of all the instructors, you know, 16 instructors or whatever it is that, you know, so description of the people, their modality, you know, whatever. And so if someone comes and says, well, where can I, you know, find out about how to find my cat or whatever it is, that they could at least ping something and see that at least these people are reputable. So we wouldn't be dealing kind of along the lines Julie said, pointing out the negative or focusing on the negative. We would just create a positive pool of people who have agreed to certain standards. And then people can, from there, select, or even sometimes, you know, you could see a picture or read someone's philosophy. They might feel an affinity for Daz, but not me, or feel an affinity for Coral and not somebody else, you know. So I think a positive pool would be good. I do think, though, you know, that people who want to come and exploit our psychic abilities as a community that we've trained for, cared about, worked for, et cetera, I mean, honestly, and I know I'm too blunt sometimes, they're lazy. They should learn it themselves. They should develop their skills back to a certain intent that Ingo had and Tom talked about. And it's stated fairly clearly in Resurrecting the Mysterious. His intent was to help everybody become psychically activated, and as such, as a being, become more. And I can't remember who mentioned that people who do tend to get deep in this with a proper orientation do tend to become kinder, more thoughtful, more aware of others, compassionate. I have to agree with that. I've seen some changes in myself, obviously not to the level other people would like, but they're there. And I've seen the quality of people like Tom and Paul and Lynn, who've been doing these things for a long time, really being super kind people and helpful people and thoughtful people. So those who would just want to come to our community and say, okay, give me a horse in the 7th race so I can get some money and go out and do this, I think those people need to get involved and learn it themselves. That'll never happen. That's a dream. I realize it. So anyways, just in a little bit of a summary of what everybody said, this conversation has brought a lot of ideas up. For me, my take on it is I think we're facing bigger problems than shortage of money. And Ingo's dream and some of the things I've read, which at some point down the road will be able to be released, where his dialogue between himself and L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology, Ingo wrote again and again and again how much he wanted and how much he dreamed. And L. Ron Hubbard supported it. He was trying to take these things he realized, formalize them, get them scientifically validated, and bring them to the greater whole without all the Scientology nonsense. And, to a certain point, that happened. None of us would be here if that hadn't happened. But when it was stolen from him, what I call stolen from him, and whisked off into some dark corner for certain activities and what have you, that was heartbreaking to him. That was crushing. And if you could see the years of the letters and the dream that he had. So I think in some sense, like anything, we should find a way to make our lives better, yes, but in balance. But let's strive for that bigger spectrum of awareness. And, ethics, I don't know if we'll ever define the true ethics or morals of it, but I just stand by that goal where let's make ourselves better as beings. And now I've had my soapbox for the day. Thanks for listening.
Can I actually ask you a quick question on that, Russell?
I charge $50 for questions, but go ahead. Yes.
Okay, that's good. You can add it to a tab. Okay. But so I understand what you're saying, and if I think I understand what you're saying, which is this idea of you want people who are coming into field to not come into it just for making money, because that kind of is a very limited scope. It's very kind of restrictive in nature, considering what's possible with RV and the expansion of consciousness, the value of that. Am I hearing you correctly when you were saying that? Is that like one of the key takeaways?
No, that's a personal disposition. I could see very well that people would say, hey, look, here's a way to do this, and then get hooked and move on into it deeper. So it could be an attractor. Maybe it's only 3 out of 10 that will stay on the greed side of it, or vice versa. So no, I can't fault it, because I don't know. First of all, I don't know hardly anything about ARV. It just has never caught my interest.
And that's you're reading my mind already, Russell. So you need to get out of there. I charge $50 for mind reading me, but that's exactly my thought was.
Yeah, no, and Paul's the one that educated me on this, truly, because I kind of ranted to him, and he said himself he's aware of people that wanted to take his yearly ARV class, got hooked and went further
And
in
then
other
they
directions.
found what was possible.
Right. So not knowing your field, not knowing ARV, and not knowing, how that's working or what those numbers are, certainly if it's bringing people in who then take a step and go further, I can't fault it. My monetary versus I don't know what you call it, but the urge to see people grow and not just use remote viewing to find their car keys and make money, that's just a chip on my shoulder.
Well, I've always felt, I mean, this is my just a personal opinion, is since I started getting into this, not as long as a lot of other people who are here who have done this, but I always felt to some extent that remote viewing had a bit of a PR problem for attracting new individuals. I mean, the way I was attracted to it, and a lot of people I know that were attracted to this field, was because it was crazy, it was outlandish, and it was also entertainment. It was also this idea, like I heard about this first from Dames on Coast to Coast AM, and then I heard a number of other, of the RV individuals with Art Bell. And I was like, whoa, you're looking at Mars, you're looking at all these crazy things. What is that possible? Is this real? And that was the attractor. But that's a very specific type of attractor, as far as it's an entertainment thing. It's not an expansion of consciousness thing, right? And so I always felt that, I mean, this opinion changed over time as I did it, because that was my original attractor. So that's what I used RV for a period, like probably 3 years, where that's all I did was like, ooh, wow, it's like I get to open the mystery book and look at whatever I want. And then, I finally realized some of the limitations with that. And I was like, okay, I need to get grounded. What does grounded with RV look like? And what's a practical use for me, not for anyone else, but I was looking at it for myself. And for me, I came to the conclusion, man, if you could really show that with an extended track record in the market or something, something saying, look, here's my 5-year track record of making X amount of money with this skill. It's undeniable that that's something that from a marketing perspective or a PR perspective for remote viewing to attract new eyes to the field of interest might work, might be a way to get new blood, new people, new minds, new interests into the field. And then just like you said, and then they might realize, oh my goodness, it's so much more than just making money. It's so much more. It's like, actually, it's way more than that. And so it's a little bit of the carrot, right?
Well, and not to betray any of your secrets, but like we were talking about yesterday, you have this beautiful long-term goal. And in a economic driven physical reality, that goal has to have money.
Yep.
And so your objective is beautiful. So what you're going to do, let's say with whatever proceeds you can make doing ARV, where you want to put it in the future is amazing. And maybe along the way, a few people will come in, get hooked at a deeper level and become a part of that. So I can't judge anything. I'm just saying at a primary, rudimentary philosophical level for myself, and the saying source works in mysterious ways, God works in mysterious ways, however you wish to describe it individually, that's true. We just don't know. So I don't want to, and that's why I tried to preface it. I don't want to sound critical of anybody who's doing it, because I flat out don't know. The outcome could be well beyond anything I could imagine. But I would like to see people, come in, learn a fundamental structure. Obviously, I'm a CRV proponent, and that's fine. But there are other structures working. There are viewers in everybody's camp much better than myself. I don't protest that. I don't think CRV is a cure-all. But I think for a person like me, who wasn't just wildly psychic to start, to come in and fail the first time, come back, try again 6 years later, take the complete training. I'd love everybody to see that, because the difference between, and it's funny, I remember when I announced I was going to go to training, Daz just sent me, the very first PM he ever sent me said, be prepared to work. And I was like, no problem, man. You don't know me. And then like 3 days into the course, I PM'd him. Oh, I see what you mean. And so I'd like to see people have that same experience. That's selfish. But if you could feel the difference of being not good and then coming around at a certain point to being okay, and then getting better. That's what I would like. I'd like to see people just take a hold of something, that one fundamental thing, whether it's CRB or whatever, and then take it to there. Where you go from there, that's up to you. You know, Daz has customized some things. I'm sure multiple other people. Maybe you'll want to switch camps. Maybe you'll want to go into the Hawaii or this or that. But if you understand the foundation where it all came from, and lots of people have taken those 6 stages, and also too, I do want to throw a plug for Tom's APP talk. He's going to be talking in depth about the 7th stage. I can't wait. It's go to the Applied Precognition Project, and it's in May. They're having a conference, and Tom's doing a couple of talks. So I just want to plug that because I'm very excited to see the 7th stage. So anyways, someone just do the 6 stages, just do the work, do the failure, have your misses, pound your head on the wall, you know, have Paul scream at you a couple of times, do something, but get a hold of it. And then, you know, there's a whole universe out there. Go explore it. Anyway, now that's 2 soapboxes. Brett, darn you.
Don, you've had your hand up for quite a while now. Would you like to say what
I'd
you want
just
to?
like to add, I don't know how much your audience knows about Marty Rosenblatt and the APP, but you know, there's been a lot of talk tonight about using RV to make money. And I just wanted people to better understand his motivation. He believes remote viewing is something that we can all do. He wants our society to be better understanding of it and more of us to be able to do it. But he realizes that serious scientists shy away from remote viewing and anything parapsychology related. And unless remote viewing makes money, most of society is going to say there's nothing to it. So his goal is to make enough money as a large group that people's attention will be turned to it and say, oh, there really is something to this. And then more research money will be made available for doing more research into remote viewing. And then more serious scientists will get involved in doing serious research. So if people are hearing that Marty's using it to make money, well, yeah, he is, but that's not his true motivation. And once you actually get to know Marty, you'll truly understand what I just said. Thanks.
Right, Tom, real quick as a feedback, and that was an oversight on my part, because when you go to Marty's talk withs and these different events, he really puts a neat, I don't know, best word, cosmological. He talks about the ethics, higher source, all kinds of things. So it's, I should have put that in context. In fact, I enjoy the depth of the philosophical aspects that he gets into many times. So thanks for pointing that out, Tom.
Thanks for that, guys. Go ahead, Don. You had your hand up for quite a while.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to be shifting gears. This doesn't have anything to do with making money. I want to get involved in, like, you know, practice targets, because I've been doing a bunch of different, I guess you would call them place targets. And there seems to be a difference between place targets and event targets. The place targets that I've been doing, you can be satisfied with a bunch of gestalts and they're coming in random order, and you can be happy with that. But when I started doing event targets, there's a storyline that isn't involved in these place targets, and I'm trying to figure out how you tease that story out from your RV. So I guess my questions to Tom, if he's willing, and to Des, or actually anybody in the audience here, is, first of all, there's an element of recognizing that you're dealing with an event target. And then there's another aspect, and that is the order or sequence of events that tell the story of the event. And I guess I'm looking for tips or whatever advice people might have on this subject.
Well, Don, since you started by naming me, I will start here and tell you that I'm a total failure with events. If you'll recall, the way I learned from Ingo was coordinate, not controlled remote viewing, coordinate remote viewing. So I'm good at going out and describing locations. And if I'm tasked against an event, I invariably tell you where the event's taking place and what the buildings are like around it and what the terrain is like and a few of those things, but I may totally miss the event that occurs there. So
okay, so that's like what I'm experiencing. And you know, it seems like there can be some sort of transition. Other people are doing it. There's got to be a methodology to this. Maybe there's like I don't know, a new layer of data management over top of like my existing RV. I guess that's what I'm trying to explore here.
Right. Well, I'm sure somebody else can answer your question better than I can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to claim to answer it better, but I'll give you just a little insight into what Paul had us do in advance. So when you're in basic, Paul has you work with just 3 fundamental gestalts: water, structure, land. And that's the gradient of targets. If you can't get those gestalts accurately and expand on them. So that is a good phase. Then in intermediate, we learn only stage 4, spend basically a week on stage 4, a preview of stage 5, and then in advanced, you get stage 5 and stage 6. So when you did advanced, we did one, Paul added, after you did your initial session, Paul added dousing a timeline. And to my astonishment, I'd never doused, and Bill Ray was my monitor, and the event that I had a window of something, I can't remember, like 100 years. And that's the time they gave us to see if we could find the time. And so when I was dousing, it was like, I was shocked because it felt like you were fishing and something nibbled. And I was like, who the heck did that? And so I landed in that time frame within 6 days of the event, which was really interesting. Events.
Were you using like a pendulum there, or you know,
This little thing? When we went there, Paul gave us this little silver chain with a triangular lead fishing weight on it. I happen to have this little stone from a necklace, and I just happened to have it with me. I threw it in my bag. I was like, okay. And so I took it apart and I made my own. So this is some sort of little stone with properties. I can't say what they are, or I don't know what they are, I mean. And then a nice sterling silver chain. So that's what I use. And so he gives you a very nice little dowsing kit in advance. As far as I know, events generally require multiple tasking. Daz can tell you because he's done a lot more events. So in other words, you get the like, say, for instance, you know, like Tom, okay, here's the location of the event. Then maybe here's a timeline of the event, and the event might involve several different people. So you might want to do a session on this person or that aspect. So in a couple of the operational taskings I have, it's been like that, like up to 4 taskings on an event, but the rest of the team got 4 taskings, but on different aspects of that event. So just like a football game, you know, you got 30,000 people watching it from different angles. And so it's kind of like that. I am not aware, and again, Daz would probably be the best one to confirm or deny this, of a viewer sitting down in a single session and successfully describing all aspects of an event because there's so many dynamics.
Yeah, there's just so many things, and people.
Right. So if I were to you know, be tasked, you know, if I said I want to, you know, be tasked an event, I would, at the minimum, if I was the only one tasked, I would probably expect 6 to 10 sessions. But working with a team, it's nice because, you know, I'm tasked on these 3 elements, someone else is tasked on 3 elements, So you get this, like Paul said the other day, the blind man and the elephant point of view. So that's my take on it, and that's how Paul handles it in training.
Okay, thanks. Des, did you have anything?
Yeah, I can add something to this. One huge difference between what you're talking about, I think you were talking about like location targets.
Location targets versus like events.
Which are good, yeah, location targets, and they're very good for training, you know, very early training targets. But events you'll find have two attributes that you don't usually get at location targets, and that is movement and energy. It's not to say that you can't get movement and energy at a location, but the inherent kind of being behind an event is energy and movement. And I don't have to be physical energy and physical movement, but an event itself transgresses over time. It's something that happens over a period of time. So there is a movement over that period of time. You know, the event could be a couple of seconds, or the event could be a couple of days, but you know, there will be that movement, and coming with that movement, there will be an energy component to it as well. So you'll definitely start picking up that, and you'll pick up that. You should pick up that, I would say, as a gestalt in the stage one part of any event target, because you know it's an inherent, and that's, to be honest, that's what makes them easy. I find them easier to do than location targets, because it does have that energy and movement to it. It's something that you as a viewer kind of gets more attracted to. But also to get more data out of targets, I can chuck. Can I chuck this in the? Yeah, I chucked a sheet in the chat list there. It's called a crib sheet I did, and I gave it to Russell the other day, and it's essentially a sheet of paper I printed out when I was training in RV, and I have it on my desk in front of me. And it's just important questions I ask myself as I'm doing an RV session, and when I'm at the end of the RV session, to make sure there it is there, to make sure I haven't missed anything. So, you know, it gives me some prompts of how to move around the target, because essentially with controlled remote viewing, you're in control. But you're also a detective. And like I say, it's almost like you're Sherlock Holmes on a case. You don't know what the case is. You don't know who the murderer is, but it's your goal to be a detective. And it's up to you to use every skill you can possibly think of to move around the target and get as much data. You know, I don't see it as you wait for the data to come to you. I see it in CRV. I'm the one there going out and actively moving around to get the data. So if I noticed it had energy or motion gestalts in my stage one, I would move myself around the target. But you could do this. You could do this at locations as well. You know, so if you notice there's a structure at a target, in a movement command you write on a sheet of paper, move yourself inside the target and then describe inside the structure, and then describe, or move yourself 150 feet above the structure and describe, or behind it. You're constant.
Okay, there's a couple of things you mentioned there. First of all of these event targets had ideograms that were energetics. And so your first tip is like right on target there. It's really very helpful. The crib sheet is fantastic. Thank you very much. I think that's, you know, you sort of, the third thing was the movement commands. I have been reluctant to do these movement commands because I'm just unfamiliar with it. And, you know, I'm not seeing anything when I remote view. I'm not like, there are no visions or anything. Maybe I'll have a momentary flash or something.
Same with me. I hardly see any visuals.
Okay. So you're getting essentially word-based perceptions. Is that right?
Yes.
And then what you're doing is, like, when I see you describe a scenario in your videos or whatever, you have assembled those things into a kind of coherent order based on your movement commands, moving around and being a detective.
Kind of, yeah. But I hardly do any of those movement commands until I'm in stage 3 and stage 4, because before that it's too much information.
Okay.
But you know, in like stage 1, I would have had the gestalts of something like land, water, life forms, structures, and you know, those kind of things. So I know they're there. And then I do get a bit more sensory data, which I write on another sheet of paper. And then, you know, your AI, which moves you into stage 3, because you're kind of like getting there in the zone then.
Okay.
And then I do my sketches and stuff, but I find myself that if I start to think that I can feel the information very slightly drying up, I then initiate the movement commands. And to be honest, I got to be honest, I learned the movement commands off of talking to Tom and Bill Ray and the guys many years ago on the Stargate list. I asked them how to get extra data, and they explained, and I think I saw a remote viewing session, and I asked them what they were doing with that, and they explained to me, yeah, move yourself around the target to extract more information, and that's essentially what I do. And you can go inside structures, below structures, beside the structures, and also think about the relationships as well. If you're seeing a structure, and or you not seeing a structure, but your ideograms tell you there's a structure and there's land and stuff, and you may be doing some stage 3 sketches. Also ask yourself, what are the relationships between the things that you're sketching on the sheet of paper, and also probe and ask yourself, if you've got one little bit of a sketch here in stage 3 and another little bit over here, also ask yourself, what is the relationship between the two and the distance in between them, the white space, and what is the white space? Is the white space, or is it something else other than space? So it's all about, as I said, it's all about being a detective, and you're just finding as many tools as you can to possibly squeeze. It's like squeezing the data wringing it out of a wet rag kind of thing.
Fantastic, excellent. Thank you very much.
I can add one other thing to that. It's funny because everything you basically touched on I wrote down 3 things and you basically said all 3 things in there that I was gonna forget. But I just have one slight, potentially helpful addition to that. Obviously, I think having a project manager who knows what, that can task you directly certain types of follow-on prompts, that can obviously be helpful. Obviously, in a lot of cases, you don't have that. So you have to be your own tasker in the session. What should I do? Well, I don't know what I'm dealing with, but let me look at it from a lot of different lenses. And that's what Daz was talking about. It's these movements, these movement commands that, especially when I'm feeling there's energy in a site, especially when I feel like there's activity of some kind, is that I'll do a target movement or a prompt and just I'll even create a new ideogram based off of it. Like the activity at the site should be perceivable, new ideogram, and follow that chain down and see what pops out. If I feel like there's an activity at the site or an energy at the site, I'll use that kind of a prompt. And there's other kinds of prompts like, they're not necessarily target movements. Target movement is more of like, if you're a camera a little bit around the site, you're moving, it's like down below, inside, outside, around, that's target movement. But then you also have the possibility of site movements as well, where what if the information isn't there, but it's connected to there? So say, for example, you're trying to solve a particular, a conspiracy that's occurred, I don't know, whatever, something has occurred, but you're interested in the perpetrators or maybe the individuals responsible for coming up with it. It's like you could prompt yourself with going to the origin of the activity. Maybe it wasn't local, maybe it happened before, and that takes you to a different site, and you can begin describing that. And so you're building like this network of information that's relationship to one another: activity, origin, the cause of something, the source of something, the function of something, the purpose of a particular thing at the site. And all those can lead to information to build this narrative about what's going on. And exactly what Daz said.
So let me just ask you, for when you're getting this is more data that I don't have right now. So there's going to be a management issue. Do you just, are you trying to organize it? Because that's a left brain activity and you want to sort of keep the left brain out of it, right?
I agree. I 100% agree. And I have a very specific method that I use for these types of follow-on prompts. That just is a very simple labeling structure and it's usually, sometimes in the middle of a session, just like Daz was saying, I'll get the impression like, oh, there's definitely activity here. Data's drawing up. Let me look at that. And then I'll do exactly that. And it just feels spontaneous and the correct thing to do in the session. If I'm done with the session, I feel like I can't really paint as good of a narrative or a picture, and I feel I need to go back in. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just label things on my sketches and I'll say, okay, that's a handle I can use to direct my attention back to whatever that is. And so like, I'll put a label of A or B or a number 1, 2, 3, however you want to do it. Doesn't matter how you're really doing it, I think. But you say, okay, the function of number 1 that I've labeled on this session should be perceivable, create a new ideogram and see what comes out of that type of a follow-on prompt.
Okay,
And,
so what you're doing is you're sort of like ending the session. Now you're looking at it full left brain. You're itemizing some things. You're realizing you need some more data.
I need more. Yeah.
And then you go back into the session, new ideograms on specific items. Is that
I
what?
will do that.
Is
Yes.
that what
Now
okay.
That's more challenging, obviously, because now you're a little bit front loaded. You're looking for an activity, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean,
right.
it's
That's
more
the
challenging.
thing. This is like
but
when I
it does
encounter
work.
people in my session and
Yeah.
I'm like scared to death to go and get information on them because how do I know there's really people there? It's like, so it's sort of like trusting, a new
Yeah.
level of trust.
People's a really good one. Actually, this is the third thing I wrote down, which is Des kind of talked about this. It's like looking about the relationship between sketches and stage 3. And he was like a structure here and the space in between and whichever. Oftentimes what I'll do is if I feel that I want more information about the relationship between things that I've drawn, I'll just re-sketch those out as a little diagram on another page. It's called a relationship sketch. Draw a line between the two things and say, okay, well, what is this sketches? If it's 2 people or 2 life forms, I'll put my pen on one of them and say, what is the relationship of this life form towards the other? And I'll see what comes in spontaneously. Then I'll go to the other one. And these are just little diagrammatic representations. What's the relationship of this B versus A, this person B versus A? See what pops in, write down my impressions. Then I'll put my pen right in the middle and say, what's the relationship between both? And that may be actually even different. And so you can do that with types of energy, with people, with, a whole bunch of stuff. These relationship diagrams I've found when it comes to narratives help in understanding what's going on.
Wow, this is fantastic. Thank
There's
you.
little tips and tricks that I've
thank you
found
very
have
much.
worked.
This is like exactly what I was like hoping to get here. Thank you very much.
Don, just add one more thing to that as well. With movement commands, you can also do movement commands in time as well. So you could literally say there, okay, I'll move myself back an hour or back a day, forward an hour. What do I now see? That kind of thing.
Okay, these are all sort of new to me. I'm not even very cognizant of motion when I do remote viewing. I just get the gestalts, not a whole lot of movement at all. But and you've given me a bunch of stuff here, so I'm really going to give this a try. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So you can also suspend time. So talk to people at the site and just say we're suspending time because we're remote viewing, and then
you can do that. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Don, it's controlled remote viewing, or if you're using controlled remote viewing, you're in control.
Okay, I have to realize this.
In control.
Thank you, Julie.
Don, if it helps, sorry, you're selling Paul's blog today. I'm usually Paul's blog only, right? But he talks about breaks there, and it can be helpful.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm not tracking on this one.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about when you can pause the RV session, or I did miss it.
Oh, I think they were talking about I could say suspend time or stop time and just sort of scope everything out while emotion is frozen. Is that right, Des?
Yes. Basically, what we did was we were talking to someone who didn't want to have to stop. It was beyond control remote viewing. It was extended remote viewing. But this person is a very busy person and he didn't want to stop to be talked to by us. And so we said, well, we can suspend time. So then he allowed himself to stop to give us feedback.
What a fantastic idea. This is really, it's something.
Yeah. And then it's remembering to then sort of really consciously say, now we'll go back into time sort of thing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it was not that loss. It's like, break management.
Well, what is break management? Because what I thought you were saying was it was about taking yourself away from it, but not actually engaging with something or someone at the site. That's what I think Don thought you were saying.
Right. I was thinking AOL break, that sort of thing.
But you weren't meaning that, were you, Pablo?
No, absolutely no. I after some time I learned that there were many types of breaks, that you could use them at your benefit depending on how you wanted to drive the session. So so that's why I was mentioning that. Sorry, Dan, if I confused you.
Yeah. Okay. I got it now. Thank you.
And not really a break, but you're suspending time rather than having a break. Yeah.
Real quick, Don, another thing you might want to consider when we took Paul's week or 6-day or 5-day operational course, he split us into teams, and one team had to be the task manager, and then the other team was the viewer. And then when we got a target, it was the opposite. The other team became, so you might find a friend that can task manage you, turn the session in, and then they can say on page 5, you had a sketch with this shape, and then retask you for you. So if you want to experiment with somebody, that might be useful for you. Getting to the point where you're too front loaded, that might be hard, like Daz said. And then one thing, it's come up a couple of times in the chat, and I'll just throw out, I was trying to put the image up from Tom's manual, but it's the people were asking about the automatic analytical response. So Tom says the final portion of the ideogram is the automatic analytical response. This is the analytical response the viewer has while or immediately after drawing the ideogram. These responses should be very general and immediate. The viewer should not think about producing a response. If it is not truly automatic, then the viewer should simply state that there is no response. It is completely acceptable not to produce an automatic analytical response. So in that sense, there's no way you can get completely, like you say, out of your left brain. The purpose of the structure is to give the left brain or the monkey mind, or one purpose of the structure, sorry, or the monkey mind, something to do. But you will, especially when you get to stage 4, you'll be making decisions. Does it go in this column, this column, this column? And at a certain point, interestingly enough, you start to put your hand or pen toward the paper, and it'll fall towards a column without thinking. And that takes some time. But when it starts to happen, it's really cool. You just, as your hand's moving down towards the paper, boom, it just goes to the intangible column, or it goes to the EI, or, how do you sort out your emotions from their emotion? And it just starts to happen. That's where the repetition and the persistent training comes in. That stuff gets ingrained, automated. I've used the analogy of driving. At first, you just worried about staying between the lines, and now you're playing the radio, talking on the phone, drinking coffee, which I'm not endorsing, but it happens. So the ideal, or trying to keep your quote unquote left brain or analytical, no, you're making decisions. And even in your S2s, when something comes in that's not an S2, it belongs in S4, you might put it over and annotate it S4. Is this an AOL? So it's I mean, you've got to have the perfect interaction of both aspects, the analytical and the intuitive.
All right. Thank you, Russell. Yeah.
Yeah, you've had your hand up for quite some time. Did you want to go next?
I prefer to talk later because you guys are on a really good point, and I'd like to see that just keep rolling.
All right. Just to add to what Russell said there, and Carl's here. She's just worked a project for me. We do quite a lot of retasking of people on operational projects as well. So like Carl and a few of the others came back with their first session, and they did have amazing data, and for an event, they actually did capture the entire event, pretty much all the viewers that worked it did. But being a remote viewer, project manager, I always want to squeeze that a little bit more out of them as much as I can. So I do retask viewers occasionally to go back and get more information, but I'm very careful on how I do it.
Yeah, how do you do that? Like,
well, I see the information I want within their page, and I see that they've kind of skirted over it and missed it, and I know that I could get them to get more data. So I then give them instructions, and I make sure that I refer to their data. So I say, on page such and such, you said this, or your data said this, or your sketch was this. Give me more. And that's all I say. So I refer them to the page, sketch, or chunk of data that I want more on. And that kind of front loads a little bit because they kind of know that I'm interested in something.
Right.
But it's their data that I'm getting them to go back on. I'm not giving them anything new. I would never use any words that signify what I'm exactly looking for. And I try to keep it as general as possible as well. I try not to make it a specific word in a certain place. I try to say, this chunk of data here or this sketch there, and it's your data. So expand that.
Okay. All right. I got the idea. Thank you.
And Don, this is Tom McNear. I don't want to sound self-serving, but if you haven't seen the manual that I produced in 1985, it will walk you through a lot of this. And what you're talking about, querying to get additional information, that's stage 5 as Ingo taught it. Now, I do know that Daz has streamlined stage 5. And I know I, for one, would love to have him give a presentation on stage 5 as Ingo taught, and then how he streamlined it. I don't want to put a burden on him, but stage 5 is a powerful tool to get additional information, especially if you start producing nouns. If you say a thing, if you say a stone, well, there were hundreds of elements of information that led you to say stone. So the benefit is to go back and look at the emanations that occurred before you said stone and see what they were that made you say stone. And that's where it's very rich with additional data that the analyst may be able to make extremely good use of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it did. In fact, I did read your manual. Your manual is actually really cool. That business about the immediate reaction after the ideogram, I didn't know that, and I put that into practice right away. It's a very important point. So, yeah, the business about going back and reviewing the data, even your AOLs, sometimes they have they lead to some sort of thought or data. So yeah, I've been trying to do that as well.
Right. If you have an AOL of a red truck driving down the road and it became a visual, then you can query what information led me to produce that AOL in my head. And earlier somebody asked, are you seeing things? And Daz says he rarely sees anything. The way I like to describe it, if when you're reading a really good book and you're right there in the scene with that protagonist,
yeah,
and your wife is hollering and you don't hear a thing she's saying because you're in the seat next to James Bond driving down the Autobahn in Germany, that's what I see in my mind when I'm remote viewing. I actually see that fuzzy, hazy image. I'm sitting in the seat next to Sean Connery and we're headed down the road. And I actually see that. But it's a fine line between sort of seeing that hazy thing and turning that into a vivid image, which is your AOL, turning it into something that's easier to see than the hazy image you're seeing.
Yeah, the AOL is, I haven't gotten to that point yet. Generally, if I'm seeing stuff, it's AOL. So, but sometimes the
AOL way to
AOLs
approach it, because if it's not AOL, if you believe it was, you wrote AOL break and you take a second break and then you go back and take the coordinate again. If that wasn't AOL, it will reappear. If it was AOL and you've
Yeah, I've
properly
heard
taken a
that. That
break,
is
it's gone.
amazing. That is amazing. So yeah, some of this is actually trust on my part. I have to trust that it's going to do this and just let it do it.
That comes with experience.
Yeah, not practice. Okay, yeah.
And somebody typed into the chat about stage 6. Is it kinesthetic? Well, for stage 6 for me, yes, I'm sort of visualizing like I'm reading a good book, but I'm also processing kinesthetically. And so when you're doing that model, a tremendous amount of information seems to come back through your fingers to you. A lot of data that would have been lost had you not been doing the modeling. And somebody mentioned the Oconee nuclear power plant. That was a really good example. I modeled, it had 3 towers. I modeled 3 towers. It had a road network around it. I modeled that. It had a long flat building right in front of the 3 towers. I modeled that. But then my hand went to the paper behind it and was doing this. And I said to Ingo, I feel like there's something here. And he started hollering at me, well then make it, write it down, draw it, do something. Don't tell me it's there, do something. And I said, but it's like an egg on a stick. And he sort of looked at me like, oh, maybe you shouldn't draw that one, because that doesn't seem to make any sense. But I did draw the egg. I did model the egg on the stick. I wrote AOL break, egg on a stick. And while you guys are chatting, I'll go back and find a picture of the Oconee unless Daz can pull it up faster. I think it's amazing to see that egg on the stick was actually there, and it would have been totally lost had I not had the kinesthetic sensation that came from stage 6. So I'll stop talking and I'll see if I can dig that up and I can show it to you before we end today.
All right, thank you.
And another thing, it's great that Tom's explaining that, and he didn't self-censor as well. He didn't say, this is crazy, this isn't going to be at the target, so I'm not even going to mention it. So never self-censor as well. Whatever you get, however crazy it is, trust in yourself. Yeah.
I have a question about the time motion concept. And by the way, Tom, I did notice your halo has shifted today and it's a slightly different one. It's fascinating how you have these halos. Okay, I can't, the lady I spoke with earlier, Julie, had mentioned this thing about suspend time. So if there's an event, I trained under the Jose Silva method back in the 1970s, which is, totally beyond most of your awareness, probably. I don't know your backgrounds. What we were taught, and I know it's not part of CRV or accredited or whatever word you use, but what we were taught was to locate, describe, and then move. And we could move forward in time on this person's timeline, on a person's timeline as they were going at that time. And it was just so, this was all presented as, of course you can do this. This is very simple. And it seemed very simple at the time. And so that was what I did and had continued to do until I started working with CRV. So the motion and time element has me really puzzled, because I took a slight course, a few week course before the hurricanes hit. Then I took I got the CRV manual, and I did some comparison. And so I mean, I know Ingo and these guys all knew each other and had commonalities, but it seems to me that if the structure is supposed to save you and it's supposed to make everything very procedural, then how can one person make a decision? I know Brett's doing that in the financial, and there's some other people who are doing it. So I'm trying to sort all of this out, because I do want to do the controlled remote viewing, which is a method, and which is the accepted method nowadays. But I'm still having the issue of, how do you parse this out? How do you separate each of these impressions? And I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. If Tom or Russell or anybody who's actually teaching DAS, if you have a method to parse these things, these items out. I just call them items, because when I took that short class, I created a form, a list, because it was so confusing to me to have to, and especially the doodle, what do you call it, ideogram, it was meaningless to me. It's like, this has it has nothing. It's like, right, this is like a Google Doodle. What does it mean to me? I mean, I get some visual, I get descriptions. Anybody?
Several people with their hands up. Is that the answer to the question for Ida, or something else?
Well, I think I know what you're talking about in a way. Basically, when you're doing a CRV session, you're just going to get a set of sensory impressions, okay? And the worst thing you do is try to make sense of it, or try to put it into a box and fit it all together. It's not going to work like that. You're just going to get an impression, get the next impression, move on. Okay, what's this? Write it down, get the impression of it. And then if you're doing a site or a target, you're trying to figure out somebody's timeline, that's how you're going to do it. You really should have somebody else go over the session, or tasker, to figure it out and go, okay, here's the question, here's what she got, then have them put that together. Because if you're trying to put it all together in one nice, neat pile, or an image that where everything fits, you're going to lead to imagination's going to start kicking in. Okay, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense.
That would be under the CRV method.
Right, under CRV.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as back to Tom's question about time, the easiest way to do it is give your movement command for like a site, like move 50 feet up, move 50 feet back. Once you're at the target site and you think you've got good contact, just give yourself a command like move to the most significant event at this site and describe. And then once you've got that down, okay, move back to the beginning of the event, describe. Move to 50 hours or 100 years after the event and describe. And you can do a P6 timeline tool. You just draw a line and you go, okay, if this starting point is the present, or if the middle of it's present, and you just move along that line, you get a little blip. You just say, okay, an event happened here. Describe that. you know. So that helps you make sense of the time thing. As far as
Well,
pausing
I
time,
use dowsing. I use dowsing for that.
Yeah.
I have a, but that was just a natural for me. We water douse. I own part of an oil well. We douse for oil, water, gas, whatever. I mean, that was just part of the family.
Yeah, my grandpa
family
used to do
mix.
that.
Yeah, so I always just would do that. Especially if I wanted to freak somebody out and make them go away. Do the is there liquid in the Coke can thing or whatever soft drink, and do the douse thing over the cans. But that's interesting. You would yeah. So anyway, I'm just trying to sort out the differences in the two techniques, and since CRV is the accepted technique now, it's like learning the piano or sewing or anything else. You go with what's the current technique. Thank you.
As I have the Oconee nuclear plant ready, I can share.
Do you have the picture? Excellent.
So here is the model I produced. And if you notice in the back, that's my egg on a stick, which seemed to make absolutely no sense. And Daz hit it right on the head. When you say something wacky like that, you tend to say, well, I'm not going to say that. People will laugh at me. But so I wrote down egg on a stick. And these were the stage 7s that I had. Econti, pine cone, and you can see that cone is very similar to coney, but at the time I didn't know it. But right here is that egg on a stick, which just seemed to make no sense at all when I was doing it. But imagine my surprise when I got my feedback, and there it was. And I would have missed that in the first 5 stages of remote viewing. It was the kinesthetic feeling of making that model that caused me to say, there's something back here. And that's what it was.
Wow. Thank you, Tom.
Actually, what I think is neat is you got the power plant in the front. The little the towers, the electrical towers.
Yes.
Because you put little dots on the paper.
You see that one there.
Yeah.
I
but
told
you didn't know how to
Ingo,
represent it.
I told Ingo there's about 50 of them here, and I'm not going to make 50 little spires. So I made one spire and made a dot for where I believe the rest of them were. And as you can see, they are there too.
Did you get an impression of water though? Or the trees or anything?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't recall. This was, bear with me. This was like 40 years ago that I was doing this. Okay, I'm done.
I wanted to ask Tom, how long was he on that session for, up until they got to the modeling part? And then how long did the modeling part, just to get an idea of the time frame of once he's, how he can do this and that after all of his training?
Most of my sessions were a half hour to 45 minutes, and then the modeling would begin. And that could take a long time depending on how intricate the model was. But most of my sessions were a half hour to 45 minutes.
Thank you, and wow.
Okay, so has anyone got any questions? I see some hands up, but to be honest, I don't know the order because Kiao's just done his, have you?
Well, no, I'll say it now because it
Okay.
looks like it's a break point here. But way previous in the conversation that I jumped into an hour late, when we were talking about morals, my teacher, Paul Elder, when he started us off in class, he gave this true story about a gentleman who visualized, he wanted a Mercedes Benz. And so this guy would visualize the Mercedes Benz, and, you know, he had the intent that it would happen in the future and all that. And unfortunately, it's a tragic story because it's a true one, I guess, that the gentleman's family died in an accident, and he got the insurance check, which he also started to appear in his, you know, during these visualizations, and he bought the or a check to buy the Mercedes with. So our teacher was trying to say to us really, really clearly at the beginning of remote viewing, a moral check, to have everything in order and your priorities well, because you don't want to just look for one thing and ignore any other potential effects or consequences. So when I teach other people that, I know it's law of attraction and it's not really, you know, remote viewing, but they definitely, any student I've ever been with, they get a little moral talk. And it's a really nice, cool, positive thing. But I think that's an essential agreement of starting anybody in the remote viewing world. That's it.
Okay, I had a question for Tom. One of your sessions I'm fascinated with is your Stanford linear accelerator session, the long thing, or however it was termed. So with that, did you see that mentally during the session?
Again, 30 something years ago, 40 years ago, but I remember having this perception that I was looking down a long, long hallway, and there were lots of linear objects lining the inside of that hallway. And it exactly what I said, I don't know, because Ingo in one of his reports said I said one thing, but when I looked at my actual transcript, it looked like I said something else. He said I said Stan, and I didn't see that, but I did say Stanford Linear Accelerator. And what made me say that, I don't know. I didn't know Stanford had a linear accelerator. But yes, I had the sketch that I gave was of a long, low structure. And the perception I had of the inside of that structure was looking down a long hallway that seemed to go on forever and had a lot of linear things inside the structure with it.
Okay, yeah, you also then led to the next part of the question. So you don't know where, because you did that, you wrote Stanford linear accelerator and then end session. So Ingo must have told you you'd hit the target. So
Right.
I was wondering, had you seen and been aware of that? And then, so you don't, so that falls in that category of what you describe as just knowingness?
Yeah, and I'm not going to even begin to try and explain it. So if you're going to put it in the chat, forget it, because it's way beyond my understanding. But
Okay.
there were at least 5 or 6 sites that I just named the site, having little to no knowledge about that site. And I've asked myself 100 times, well, did I recognize it? And that's why I said that. Did I get phonetics or something? Well, in the cases I'm referring to now, I didn't. I just named the site. One of those was Oral Roberts University. And if you've read Jim Marr's book, where Jim interviewed Ingo, Ingo was amazed with that one, because in fact, he said, I thought Tom was going to flop on this one because it was such a unique campus. But I said, it's a school, it's a church school, it's very complex, it's Oral Roberts University. And he about fell out of his seat when I did that.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Rose. I was just going to make a short comment about the gentleman who said that he sees locations more than events, because it's a bit of a synchronicity that I was just reading an article about autism in the last couple of days. And there's a distinction in autism between global perception and local perception. And that autistics tend to perceive more locally in terms of like a location where the things are what they are, as opposed to the overall gestalt of an event that's taking place. The autistics will focus more on the things that are there, and they'll miss the event, which is just like the gentleman said. And I'm wondering if maybe this is evidence that this particular person might be autistic in that they tend to be more locally perceiving. I find that, though the article did say that autistics can do both. So they do have the global perception as well. So I just wanted to make that comment because I just thought it was kind of relevant in a tangential kind of way.
I have not heard of that. You don't have a web link or something for that, do you?
Actually, I have the article. I'm just afraid to leave the Zoom room to get the link. If I get cut off, let me back in, okay? I'll try and get it for you now, the link to the article, okay?
Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Rich, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, just in general for you guys. I know like Daz, I asked a week or two ago what you guys listen to when you're remote viewing. You said the last couple of years you've been listening to Interstellar, the soundtrack for it. Do you guys meditate at all before you remote view, or do you just kind of jump into it more often than not? Or is there a intention of clearing the mind that lasts? When I think of meditation, I think maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. Do you do anything like that?
I can't answer for anyone else. All I can tell you is I used to meditate a hell of a lot more when I was, let's say, less experienced. And that used to be like a 20-minute meditation to music just to really clear my mind from all the noise, how to pay the bills, any arguments may have had with the better half, that kind of thing. But literally the last couple of years, and it may be just because I'm literally doing this every day now for a job. I just sit down with a cup of coffee and say, okay, I'm going to start. And for some reason, I have this weird ritual where I take my watch off. I always like to not have my watch on. But that's just a ritual thing. So I literally just take my watch off and just have a big sigh kind of thing to let myself relax. And I just go to it nowadays. But everyone's different, and I did find meditation very beneficial in my early days.
I appreciate
One
that.
thing,
What do you
Rich,
guys? Yeah, like Russell, what do you do?
I don't. I was just going to say the way Paul instructed us right out of the gate, he told us about his old cool down ritual of listening to like 80s rock. He told us if he could go back and do it all over again, he would have no pre-session cool down ritual, whatever. So I just started from the minute, and you'll be sitting there in say Paul's little waiting area, and the next monitor, whether it's Bill or Paul or Angela Thompson Smith, and you just get called. That's it. It's just, okay, go into this room and do your session. So you just got to get up, sit down, grab the paper and the pen, and so that's the way I do it. But use your PI, personal inclemency tool before the session. Take all that stuff and objectify it, get it out. Paul even said, like, we got to watch Paul do 2 sessions. The class created a target, then his assistant instructor was the one that issued the number. So double blind session and the 4 of us watching. Paul had literally like 15 personal inclemencies, car payment, remember to check on this, da 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 da. He emptied his mind there on that list, objectified it, got it out of his head onto the paper, and then he jokingly said, and afterwards it makes a great to-do list. So just use that personal inclemency tool. And and Lynn has kind of mentioned this too, where he just does it as, okay, I'm going to mow the lawn, I'm going to wash the car, I'm going to do a session, I'm going to go to the store, just as a normal part of the day. I think personally, just as an opinion, if you put too much emphasis on it and you get yourself too worked up before a session, or there's a certain way to do it, you might cripple yourself. So now I just simply grab, and like Daz, it's weird. If I have a ring or anything on, I take it off. I don't know why. It's just, I don't like the feel of it. I don't have any other reason. And then you grab the paper, you grab the pen. If you have any advanced visuals, objectify them, dissolve them out of your mind onto the paper, write anything distracting you from the session, and just go to work.
See, that's great to know, because I oftentimes find myself that I'm so busy in my life that I have it in my head, okay, well, I need to meditate for 20 or 30 minutes before I do a remote viewing session. And then it kind of gets pushed off, and I don't put the focus on actually remote viewing because of that time commitment. So it's good to know that you can just kind of jump into it and just do it without some sort of
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the chat for you from Paul's blog, where he actually addresses this whole thing.
For me, I take about a 15-second cool down. Once I actually sit in the chair, I put pen in hand and I hang my head and consciously focus on making sure everything is cleared from my mind. For me, personal inclemencies, maybe it's because I'm getting old and I don't have so many of them anymore. I only write down something of real significance, and it's usually a physical malady that I'm experiencing or something. But for me, I sit in the chair, I hang my head for about 15 seconds, and just before I start, I say a brief prayer. God, you created all things, you know all things. Tell me what I need to know about this site. Thank you. And then I'm ready to go. And it usually takes 10 to 15 seconds. But I have to qualify this because I've had so many people come back to me when I say that. Oh, let's see. So I've got my pen, I've got my paper, I said my prayer, now I'm ready. It's not a checklist. You have to you either have a relationship with God or you don't. I do, so I ask him to help me.
Great.
Awesome, thank you.
Rich, just another thing as well. I find as well, or what I forced myself to do a few years back was I forced myself to RV in every situation I could find. So I literally did RV sessions on the bus, on the train, in the work office at work when people were there, just to make myself, usable in any kind of situation that may be at hand. Don't get too comfortable in having to have the lights in a certain position, a bed, a coffee by your side. I just made it as uncomfortable as possible.
Ingo said he wanted us to be able to remote view in a foxhole with bombs going off around us.
Well, when you say that, Daz, do you mean like, okay, you're on the bus. Okay, I'm going to take the next 5 minutes to do a super short remote viewing session. Do you kind of like, what am I going to see at my next stop? And then
no,
do that, or
not,
how do you?
Not that spontaneous, but if I know I'm going on a bus journey up to London or something, and I know it's going to take me a couple of hours, and I've also got RV targets due, I'll take the paper or a tablet with me and say, okay, I'll just do it on the bus. And I've been in a cafe and I've done it there, or like I've been at work and I know I got a target due. I don't wait for the ideal situation. I'd like go into the break room and just sit down amongst all the noise and just do the RV session.
Well, one thing too, Rich, actually, Tom's comment just reminded me. I only do this for operational sessions. I don't do it for practice sessions and other things. What I do is I'll actually write out what
I'm
I call.
So sorry, Russell. I have to go because of a work thing, but please keep talking for everybody else. But I do have to cut out. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll skip it.
I think somebody else wants to hear it though.
Yeah, show us, Russell.
So what I do.
Yeah, please.
this is for operational sessions, and in a certain way, it's kind of my own sort of prayer. I write down, my session intent. So as an example, to provide only useful and accurate data to offer the optimum solution for X, the person I'm working for, and their client. And I always write a little thing where my intent is, I want to make the world better. So when I get a professional operational session, I'll write that out. A couple other things I put to myself: provide only data in the designated stages. Or if I get in a cycle, like for instance, I'll get a bunch of S4 data in S2, I'll make a note for that cycle, not all the time, but only put S4 data where it belongs, save it for S4. And then I end it with the intent and the hope that the work benefits a person, benefits the task manager, and benefits the world.
Any last few questions, guys? Because I know we were a bit late for some of you, but we, for myself, I've been doing this for 3 hours now. It's just gone midnight. Any last questions, or are we going to leave it there for tonight?
I think this is about the only session I've managed to stay online and stay awake. So thank you very much.
Well, that's good news.
Just for me anyway. I don't know about everybody else.
Thanks for everyone for coming along tonight, and thanks everyone for sharing such valuable info as well. It's been a really great discussion.
Thank you as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just before you go as well, next week we got Julia Mossbridge on. She's going to be talking about her projects involving remote viewing and the concepts of love and all that kind of experimentation that she's doing. So that should be really interesting as well.
Looking forward for
Thank you, everyone. It was nice meeting you, Joey.
Have a good weekend, everyone, and take care. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.